Okay, returning from executive session, is there any motions that you guys would like to make following?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we hire Janelle Shanahan for the co-clerk position.
I will second that one.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to hire Janelle Shanahan for the co-clerk position. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Next item is the December school board meeting, our regular meeting, which are typically on the third Wednesday of the month. Currently scheduled for December 18th. We just wanted to make sure that worked for everybody.
I got something on my calendar. It says GVSD something.
School board meeting.
It's already on your calendar.
You never know, could be basketball or something.
You
Yeah.
have basketball.
I think
Are there any
Stephanie
basketball
checks. Huh?
I believe George has basketball.
Oh, you
Basketball's
do?
the day before. It's the 17th, it looks like.
Basketball's fitting on my calendar yet, but I get it in there.
Yeah, basketball agreement on the 17th.
You're correct.
The girls'
It is only the boys that are in council. On Wednesday.
Believe me, it wasn't me that did this calendar tight, so.
You're good with it, Clint?
I have no problem.
It's good with me.
All right, let's just keep that as it is then. We have to vote on that. Next item is training by Randy Dewey. He's going to talk to us about the audit, budget, funding sources, and explain other statements and documents.
I'm gonna go back and forth with my seat here and there because I didn't print out anything. A lot of it I did more prints from last year. So kind of leave that for now. I'll go to the right screens and that kind of stuff. For the viewers out there and all that kind of stuff, I just want to remind people who I am. My name's Randy Dewey. I'm actually the finance director at Nampa Schools. I've been helping here. We have an MOU with Garden Valley to be able to help with the finances here, to be able to help get things done. And that's the plan right now is to help through that and learn all the fun stuff about how things work in Garden Valley. So it's definitely been a learning experience for me on some things. And so, but things are going well. So don't look at this right now. I just want to make sure we're on the same page with what we're doing. So my plan is on this is to be very interactive with you guys. All right. So I want you guys to ask questions. I want you guys to understand how funding works and how things work, because the moment I'm going to spend this first part to explain this is how funding works in school districts in general. This is how it works. And I'm going to use a lot of last year's numbers because all those reports are there. Okay. And then this year, the reason we're going to only use the little bit of the reports is because the way the system works, and I'll show you guys here in a little bit, we actually don't know anything for real until honestly in January. It's terrible. So we're halfway through a year and then you don't know really how good you're doing. You can kind of get some understanding of that. So that's kind of where we are in that. So I just kind of want to let you guys know what's going on with that. Yes, go ahead.
For the record,
You don't
will
need
you
to raise
share
your hands,
with
whatever.
the public what the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding, means with Garden Valley School District and how much we are paying?
Yes. So what the memorandum of understanding means is that basically gives us the authority to come in and talk to your vendors, talk to the banks and all that kind of stuff to act as if we're going to do your financials for you. My staff in Nampa School District is doing the accounting. We're also doing payroll. We're doing some HR stuff in our system, in the system, and we're also doing my work, which is CFO. We've made an agreement with Garden Valley that we will charge no more than $1,000 a month. And I will be straight up honest with you. It's cost us more than $1,000 a month. And I'm okay with that. And the reason I'm okay with that, because I do believe the big districts need to help the smaller districts out. I mean, it's one of these, the experience needed for school districts right now, unless you've had one that's been in here and just grown through it for many, many years, which a lot of small districts have. When there's a lot of change like this, it's very, very hard to get somebody of good experience at the income levels that they're willing to take and what you guys can afford. And so, and it's really more of, you just don't know what you don't know in some of these aspects. And so that's what we're bringing in experience. We have vendor experience. We have different things. The reason they found me is because there was a frantic call from in July when everybody left and that kind of stuff. And we needed to get payroll out. And my system is the same as the system that Garden Valley uses. And so that's what we're doing right now. So presently what we're working on, a lot of it is really fixing the system and how it's currently set up to kind of make it work better and doing that kind of stuff. And we're going to add some more online stuff here shortly in that as well. So that's what we're doing with the MOU. So, yeah, any questions so far? Yes.
I have a question already.
Yeah,
So
go
do
ahead.
we decide to stick with that system or are we gonna transfer over eventually?
So it's up to you. At this point in time, we need to get it all fixed first, and before we can get Debbie on board a little bit more. My concern is I think there's a lot to learn in a little bit of time right here. So I'd anticipate being on board at least till the end of this fiscal year, me helping with the budget, me helping that. And then at that point in time, we can decide how much you guys want to go further on your own.
And that's the difference between Tyler and Mindspring?
Skyward.
Skyward.
Yeah. And we're still trying to work with Skyward to see the other software. So people know is that the district had run into an agreement with another software vendor to move into that new system. And unfortunately, that move didn't go very well. I don't know whose fault it was, but it didn't work. Or it was it was just not working in a situation. In order for my district to help, we had to stay in the old system because we know our system, we know how to do it. We actually have access to it in our world. And I know how it works up and down, and my staff does as well. So we've decided to stay on this system for now. And then at that point in time, if we do things get changed, then we can kind of go from there.
Did we work on getting the money back?
I don't think we're getting our money back. What they do, what we're trying to do is basically strong arm them a little bit in terms of trying to get follow up on the rest of the contract. Technically, we have a contract for 3 years to do that, for almost like $9,000 a year or something like that. The reality of the situation, Skyward is a massive corporation. The size of your guys' district in that 9,000, and put it in proportion to my fees for is about $150,000 for my system a year. So that's the size of district they're wanting to deal with. They don't really care of this little district, and I don't think they're going to want to deal with it. And we have enough, even if they want to try to take us to a tort claim and do all that stuff, we have enough knowledge of our system and what they didn't do for us and what we already paid them that I don't think anybody would get anywhere anyway with it. So at this point in time, I don't see they're getting any money from us. Whether or not we can get money back, I don't know. The only issue I say with that is because I don't know what they tried to do during the other regime and how much, a lot of that was training, a lot of it was stuff. And what we saw in the system and what Caldwell, finance director, came in and looked at it, and she's a Skyward expert. And she's like, there's nothing here that we can even do with. We'd have to basically start over. So what was pulled into the system wasn't even good information to pull in. And I can believe that because what we've seen in the system, how much we've had to fix, I'm not sure how they could have pulled that in effectively in the Skyward anyway. So it really was kind of a bummer that it was just lost of money there, unfortunately. Yeah.
And to be clear, this Skyward, that contract was signed before July.
January of 2023. So it was a long time ago. And it was supposed to, I've never seen an implementation take a year and a half. So I don't know what happened in the middle of that. And I'm guessing that we'll never know. I think there's some reasons for it, but I'm going to keep that to myself right now.
We're probably not gonna have to keep paying $9,000 a year.
Not to
Something
them.
We're not gonna get.
No, not to them. We'll fight it all we can. They'll have to actually come and sue us in Idaho, and it'll cost them more to sue us than it would be to them just to say, you know what, get out of the contract. And in the moment of time, I can be real creative in my discussions with them if they want. I say it nicely in that, and they will get it. And Cheryl was supposed to help us, and they agreed to extend it for 6 months, but we're not going to pay them a dime because they just didn't do anything for us. If anything, I think they kind of took our money, and I don't think it's necessarily their fault as a company. I think they tried. I think just there was things happening over at this side that the process wasn't going to be effective. And the solution they provided was a much higher end solution than what the district even needed, was the other thing for it. So, which is unfortunate. So, any other questions? All right. So this is school funding 101. Like I said, it's easy for me because I've done it now for 11 years. I used to audit this for 10 years prior to that, even before. And especially my very first job as an auditor was with Boise School District. So I thought I knew it going in, and then I got into this job and I realized I didn't really know much at all. So it's crazy, all the nuances and all the different things that are happening. Debbie's seen it regularly. It's like, what's this report? What's this do? What's that? And it's just all these different things are always constantly hitting us and that. But really, it kind of boils down to a couple different things. Really, our funding is based on average daily attendance. And what that means for our school district is, even though we have an enrollment of say 230, if we only have 220 kids come in on a daily basis on average, then we're only going to get paid based on that 220. Okay. So there was a time during COVID, and you guys get the benefit of that as well when people came in here. They switched for a couple of years to average daily enrollment. And the reason we've been wanting average daily enrollment as a school district forever is that, example, you have a classroom of 20, 25 kids. Well, just because 3 of them doesn't show doesn't mean you still don't have a classroom of 25 kids, right? So you have to staff it based on the kids you have enrolled, not necessarily what you have there. For some reason, legislators thought that we were making up enrollment and ADA and stuff like that during COVID, that we didn't know our numbers, even though every single kid has a specific number that's identified from the state. So we didn't make up anything, but they just didn't understand. There was a law that was on the books to allow us to stay on there, and the governor vetoed it last year. Not last year, but the year before, which blew everything out of the water last year for a lot of different districts and stuff. It was about $150 million that got basically taken out of the environment last year for school districts because of move back down to average daily attendance. The other thing we're finding, and especially hitting us in Nampa as well, is parents before, when your kid has sniffles and that kind of stuff, were easily like, okay, go to school, whatever, just go, because we need you and we're willing to deal with it. Well, after COVID, everybody's like, no, don't come. If you're sick, just stay home, right? Yeah. Well, that affects our funding. The other thing we've noticed is what people don't quite understand in this whole role is we want kids to come. No teacher wants their kid to stay home, because every time that kid's not there, it means that they have to do more work to get that kid back up to speed. And it's usually not the kids that are the greatest kids. It's the kids that are kind of down here that are coming. Those are the ones that are even harder to get back up to speed. So it's not to our advantage to have kids not here. So it's a conversation that a lot of people don't understand up in the legislative rates and the funding side of things, which is a real frustrating thing for us.
Randy, I've heard different things, but what's their definition of average daily attendance for a student? How many hours a day?
Yeah, so the way it actually works is this. So you have my kid. I'm just going to say my kid's name is Toby, okay? Toby comes for the day, and we have a calendar that we actually send to the state. So in your guys' world, it's four days. So if my kid came here, you have 4 8-hour days, right? I believe. And then I don't know what your Friday is. So I'm just going to assume the 4 8-hour days, 4-day school week, okay? Well, what happens is every day that my child would come here, then you get 8, 8, 8, and 8. And your need to be, and the way the schools work is there's either a 2-hour or 4-hour. So in the state side of things, you have to have either 2 hours to make a half day, or it's 4 hours to make a full day, even though they come for however many hours. I think it's actually for kids at like 6.5 or so. I don't know how many hours your kids actually make here. So each day they show up, then you've got a total of 4 days in there. That's your average daily attendance. You got enrollment of 4 and your average daily attendance of 4. Well, if you miss a day, you got enrollment of 4, average daily attendance of 3. You add all those up, divided by the number of days. That's how they get your average daily attendance for the district. It's very convoluted, and the reason they have to do it that way is because you have kids that come throughout the session too. So you have some kids that come a week or 2 later. You got some, so they have to add up every kid individually, add up all their aggregate attendance, and then divide it by the number of possible days that they could have come. And it's a very weird calculation. Makes sense to me now because I've been here for a long time. But it's not one that's easily, you really have to look at the data to really go down and get deeper to find out if it's even wrong.
So it's not just cut and dried. It's like a big moving target then from one end of the spectrum to the other. So you could have a kid that misses, say, less than half of their school year, but you wouldn't get credited for maybe 20% of it.
Yeah, even though they're enrolled for the year.
Right.
Now there is a specific things in there as well that the state has is if this kid has 10 days in a row, then you have to actually get rid of the kids. Like if you've missed, unless you can prove that they're overly sick or something like that, because you're actually supposed to de-enroll them at that point in time because you're not there anymore. They're not coming to school. Obviously, they haven't come for 10 days. I mean, it's weird little rules like that you have to deal with. Yeah, and it's all digital. We use Power School. I don't remember what you guys use for your student information. It's what? Alma. Yeah, and so all that stuff is kept in your student information system, and then it's uploaded to the state at different times. And so the way it works is that student information system also keeps information about teachers and who's teaching classes, and that it's a big database to make sure the teachers actually are qualified to teach the classrooms and all that stuff. Goes in the state, and then each month you send that in for the first, and then that's the data that comes in the state that then they start making our reports. The hardest part about that is you could be doing it right all year long, and then that information comes to the state, something gets out of whack, and then the state doesn't give a whole group of your kids attendance. And it's either the teacher wasn't certified to be in that spot, so that whole group of attendance doesn't count. And those are the things that are really hard to catch, and those are the things I'm trying to go through to make sure what we're doing with the IC, and those are the things we have to look at to make sure every kid is actually counted right. Because if not, what happens? The state doesn't know if our data is right or wrong. That's what we submitted, and it doesn't necessarily error out. It just doesn't include them, and they go to abyss, which is real frustrating. So those are the things we look at. And in this district this size, it's not the end of the world. You can do it relatively easy. But in my district, where we have 13,500 kids, makes it hard. West Data, it's 40,000 kids, and makes it even harder for them. So we have specific programs and different things that we deal with our systems that kind of pull out that bad data and make sure we're doing it right. It's tough. All right. So the way it works is, and I'll show you the documents here in a little bit, but there's really two main times that school districts are, school districts are graded, if I should say, for average daily attendance. The first one is called the midterm, and my handwriting is terrible, so I am not a teacher by any means. The midterm units, and then there's what was called the best 28 weeks. All right. So this one, they changed the name of it. It used to be first 10 weeks, right? And what this midterm is now is basically your first day of school to the first Friday in November. Okay. So, and this one is literally our most important number for everything we do. And the reason for it is this number here, and I'll show you the numbers here. This one is what the state provides us, and this is what our salary-based apportionment is based on. With salary-based apportionment, and I'll show you all the documents from last year. We'll put it on the board here. Basically, this is where they pay us for our teacher salaries. This is where they pay us for our admin salaries and our classified salaries. This is where they pay us for our PERC and those type of FICA benefits as well. Not our health insurance, that's different. So this one is our most important. So those first days of school, that is crucial for kids to be there. Because at that point in time, when you have all this money going, this is probably 60 to 70% of our funding is this first period of school. And so there are a lot of other things, once attached to this too, these numbers go in, that as soon as these go in, they also affect other special stuff as well. So now they use the midterm numbers for other stuff to say, okay, now here's some special funding that's outside of the salary-based apportionment that goes other ways. Yes.
I was just going to point out that I think we kind of hurt ourselves this year with our calendar, the way we did it, because we allowed a full week for Thanksgiving. And so that made it to where we started school pretty early in the summertime. And I know there was a lot of kids that missed that first week because of it.
Yeah. And if they're enrolled, you've missed all of that. You're correct. So those are the type of things when you guys do your calendars, you say, hey, what day is generally bad or good? So in our example, we knew in Nampa that the day after Halloween is typically notoriously bad because people, especially if it's a weekday, right? So we put that as a teacher work day. So there's no school that day. So if there's a day you typically know is just not going to be attended, those are the things you think about in your calendar, especially in those that midterm, that can truly, especially when you guys are a 4-day school week, that dramatically affects your numbers, especially. So if you know it's going to be hard to get kids early. Then those are the things you have to look at. It's like, which is more important, our funding or a full week of Thanksgiving?
So is it easy to pull like summary reports out of Alma? Can we look
Oh,
at
yeah.
like attendance and like
Oh,
which
yeah.
days are missed the most?
Yeah,
all that kind
yep.
of stuff?
All that
That's
data.
usually done through the calendar committee.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, all that data's there. Those are the things that, we had an old superintendent that talked about it in the calendar side, and I don't know how you guys has done. What we've noticed in ours, and I'll be basically blunt, is a lot of the calendar isn't about the kids. It's more about the adults. When do the adults want off? When do the adults want to do things? Example for us at Nampa, we were 75% free and reduced, but they wanted the full week of Thanksgiving off so they could go on vacations. They just say, we're 75% free and reduced. Who's going on a vacation? Who's not eating that week? Whose parents are working now that have to now find health care, those type of things. Those are the type of things people weren't thinking of until we were bringing those things back up. And so I don't know how you guys do it, but we've had to kind of think of those things when we're looking at things to say, you know what, we got to, but our district also goes for, Thanksgiving as well. So I can't say much about that, but it is one of those things that is frustrating. So when you start early, we've had a lot of times too, where people are like, in other states, they can't start by law before Labor Day. Right? So you got people from other states and like, oh, I didn't know schools start already. They didn't even know we were started already back in August. And so that's a big thing for people as well. So that we've had those people move in and just not even know to get their kids ready for it. So
what is the solution for that? Like, I mean, sometimes we have more of like a migratory type of population that's moving through or things like that they might be up here for the best, they might be someplace else for the best time of working, and then they come back to live with grandparents or whatever through winter. And so is there something that can be done to, like a certain percentage that has to be a change in our enrollment or our attendance to be able to capture those kids?
So again, this is only a specified period of time.
Yeah.
So if they come after, then it's just additional kids.
Right, but if they
So-
come in October.
So if they come in October, then you're going to get credit for any day they're there. So it's not like you're missing them for the other times because they're only there for a week, and you got that credit for them for that week. So their aggregate attendance is going to give at least 5 days, and they were enrolled for 5 days or 4 days, that kind of thing. Does that make sense? So you're not getting it's not hurting you. And now if they were enrolled from day one and didn't show up until mid-October, then that's a big deal. And now what you want to do is you want to look at your numbers and say, wait a second. And that's the whole 10 days thing. And the state actually requires you to say, if they're not here for 10 days, get them off your books. And that's why you want to get them off your books, because you don't want them to be included, because that number it'll show a big zero in there. It'll mess up everything. It'll say, hey, that kid should have been there for 35 days. He only showed up for 10. Your average is obviously terrible. And you do that enough times, and that's what's going to mess your attendance up. So that's why enrollment in reports is super important to get that cleaned up as quick as possible, because you don't want anybody on there that's not coming.
Yeah.
And you want to basically start them on the day that they do come. It's not the end of the world. What happens in our world, because we have a lot of charters, that take that first time, then they'll test them and say, oh, you're a bad kid, or you're not effective in this school. So we'll get a bunch of those kids that don't do well in charters in December. Imagine that, right after the date. It's a known thing that happens, and then they take our other kids, that are, it's kind of how it works. I don't think you guys have any charges in this area, right? But it is something that we see it all the time, and we have a huge migrant population. We're one of the biggest in the state, and we see that come and go constantly. We just have to be really anal with getting them unenrolled as soon as they get there, and so you're just knowledgeable where they are at those times. So, did I answer your question? Yeah. All right. Any questions so far on this? All right. So the next one is this best 28 weeks. So what they do throughout the rest of the year, they look at what your enrollment is and your ADA is for, there's 40 something weeks in the school year. I don't remember how many exactly, but then they'll look only at their best 20 weeks. So if you have certain weeks that are bad, even if they're in this little area, then they won't count against you, right? But this is your best 28 weeks. And what this number is, this is a number that is used for our operational money and our health insurance money. So that's the money, what a lot of people call it M&O. We used to call it discretionary. We kind of changed our wording on that because it's no longer discretionary. It's really operational. This is really where we get our money for our, like I said, our health insurance money comes in that way. And this is where our food, your lights, your janitorial, your everything else non-payroll related on your special services, all that kind of stuff is done through there. And so, and that's where this money is. And I'll show you the difference between the calendar. And usually what happens in most every world, except for in alternative programs, is you usually have less number of kids and attendance in this best 28 weeks than that, because the lower grades will tend to get more, but the high schools will start to get low because people will start to drop out. And the problem is, and you'll see our divisors and how that works. You lose a high school kid, but you get an elementary kid, it's actually worse for you because the divisors and the way the state pays us is actually different. So if you get kids that drop out in high school, and it actually kills you in this, and especially in the latter half when kids are decided they're not going to go, or they retire, they graduate early or something like that, then it just kind of hits those times. And so those are the things that we watch out for to make sure that those are there. So, and usually this is about, when I looked at your guys', what the estimate was for the budget was about 96 or 97%, which in your guys' world is kind of big, a decline, but that's about normal in some other worlds as well for us as well. So any questions on that before I show you the actual numbers from last year?
So what if they're not dropouts? What if they just graduated?
So there is a way in the system that you actually put them in the system as an early grad, and then we still get credit for that kid going forward. But it's super important that they don't just call him as absent, then it goes against this. But if they graduate early, then at that point in time, you keep them in the system. Is that we went through this just recently in Nampa because we went to trimesters, and the kids can take so many more credits right there that they're getting out possibly in the first trimester and not wanting to go the rest of the year, which you can do that. The problem we had was with sports. IHSSA basically says
4 periods.
you have to have at least 4 periods in the semester before.
Mm-hmm.
So if you graduate early and you want to do track, you got to make sure you guys are in semesters, right? You're not trimester.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a semester, you got to make sure they were at least in 4 periods the semester before they can't play.
Or they
That's how
can't
it
really
works.
graduate either. They can't really graduate and play.
Yeah, you can't be. Yeah, you can't. Yeah. And so what a lot of our kids will do is they'll maintain a couple classes and so they can at least still walk with their, the kids that graduate a year early, like I had a staff that her daughter graduated an entire year early. At that point in time, they're done. You can't get credit for that kid for the next year because they're not even enrolled anymore.
Yeah.
That's the difference. And that's actually not as uncommon anymore because of the IDLA classes and extra period and dual credits that they do. There's kids like my kid, I think is going to graduate with like 30 or 40 credits, when it's all said and done with all the extra money and stuff like that the state gives. So any questions on that so far? Yes, go
Well, I
ahead.
was just going to comment that this is, we just got done with a report that had to do with our cohorts. And so these students are tracked for 4 years, and then we have to identify where they've gone after that. And this is the whole cohort when they start in 9th grade and the transfer of them. And so there's like all of these safeguards in place for additional data that's required in these reports that also give us ratings.
And the crazy thing is they actually will start kids from the moment of time they get in school because they only give you credit for 12 years.
Yeah.
So if that kid doesn't graduate and comes back for another year, senior year, you actually don't get credit for that kid again because they should have graduated last year. So you won't even get credit for any of this. They're just not a graduate. And so you don't get any of the ADA, that kid. You're just trying to get him graduated at that point in time. So the state just says, no, you get 12 years with them. That's all you get. So
You get paid for 12 years.
yeah. And so a friend of mine, her son is super good in basketball. At one point in time went and played on the same team as Bronny James' high school team down in California. He was that good. So the way they do it a lot there is a lot of kids will grade down. So they wanted him to grade down twice. So instead of going to 9th grade, they wanted him to stay in 8th grade twice in order to, So that was common occurrence now in California. So he did that once and went to West Data. He went to 8th grade twice, and now he's in 9th grade. Well, they already know he was in 8th grade twice, so they're only getting his senior year at West Data isn't going to get credit for.
So he's still going to get to play sports.
He's still getting to play sports. He's just, that's the whole thing. Because once you're in 9th grade, then that's when they count it. So as long as you stay in 8th grade and you don't enroll in the high school, you can do that as many years as you want. Bad thing is he's still 5'8". He's not going to get there anyway, so it doesn't matter. But he's like the Energizer Bunny. He just goes and goes and goes. So that's what his deal is. All right, so I'm going to give you central reports. I'm going to try to make it as big as possible. And again, I'm going to remind you this is last year. So, and I'm going to go the first one from last year. This one we're going to look at is the first. This is the midterm, and I'm just going to go up there. All right, so I'm going to come up here and talk about this. So this right here is exactly what I was talking about before. Remember all the kids, and so these tracks are just kind of how the system works and just the different elementaries. So as you look here, there's different divisors for different type of kids, right? So this first area, this kindergarten track here, this track 102, and yeah, so this track 102 is kindergarten for you guys. The divisor is 40, and the reason for that is the state only pays us for halftime kindergarten. We're one of 4 states that only pay for halftime kindergarten, also one of 4 states that doesn't pay for anything in preschool unless you're spent. And we actually have laws in the books that say we can't even use spend general fund money on preschool. It's anti-preschool and anti-kindergarten. The laws are crazy, which really hurts us in Nampa because we have a lot of migrant population that just doesn't come in. We have one school came in at 8% provision. So it's really tough. I'm not sure how you guys do it, but so the advisor here is for every 20 kids, for 40 kids, you get 1 unit is what we're calling. So everything converts into units at this point in time. So when we're going, the next one here is elementary, and this is 1 through 6. So elementary in their world, I don't know if you guys do middle school or high school. I think you guys do middle school, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So in the state's eyes, everybody still is in the junior high model. So that's 1 through 6, 7, 8, 9, and then 10, 11, 12 is secondary, right? So they do elementary, do the same thing, but elementary 1 through 6 has a different divisor. So it's 16-1. And secondary, anybody above that is at a 12-1. So that's why I was saying, so if you lose your secondary, but you gain elementary throughout the year, you're really actually in a downfall because you really want to try to keep the secondary in this population. And the reason they do this here is because they know in secondary classes, especially in high school, you're going to have specialty classes. Some of your high-end classes isn't going to have enough. So you have different classes, your electives and stuff. So it's meant to be different. And so they know you're going to need more teachers for high school and middle school because of just the way that the systems work for that. The exceptional education is they give us a little extra money. You notice that they kind of take a little bit out of here and then they kind of give it back here, but they give it as a better divisor here on some of them. The bad thing is they actually give us a worse divisor than the 12. So you guys get specialty divisors because of the size you are. In Nampa, this actually helps us. This actually hurts you because that 787 here, they're only giving you 14-foot and that instead of the 12. We'll see how that hurts you. So in Nampa, in secondary, it's a lot bigger in ours. We're at like 19 or 20 in that. So it's kind of weird how the formulas work for everybody.
Sorry, I'm a little slow. So the divisor you want the lowest divisor is
Correct.
beneficial.
Correct, because your reality is we want this number to be as big as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're dividing the reporting period by the divisor, and then that ends up with.
Yeah, and the way this works, remember
the biggest number you get.
Yeah, and so remember my example. My kid goes for 5 days or 4 days, and that adds up into these categories here. And then you divide it by the number of days in the recording period, and that gets your ADA. That's your average daily attendance. The weird thing about this, again, you don't see it here, but it's made in the background, is those kids that actually come in mid-term. You don't see it in here, but it's kind of mixed in here, and it kind of adjusts this, play with that to make it all work. It's kind of a weird deal altogether. So, but in any event, that's how it works. And you'll see all these add up, and then they're divided. So you got your adjusted ADA here, and then that's how much it is. So that's basically what it is. And then the other thing you'll notice here is you got a really small school enrollment. But what the system says is if you got a really, really small school, the minimum you can get for that is at least 1 unit. So the fact that you might even have 3 kids in there normally wouldn't give you a full unit over here, right? So that's what I'm saying. So those 3 kids, the fact that you have that school, you're getting a whole unit for that. There's also some additional things on there that this small school is actually getting you as well. So one of the things Hannah and I talked about earlier this year was, hey, why don't you just bring those kids back down here, and it just busts kids down here, and then you can aggregate your teachers and that. At first I talked to the state on that, like, whoa, don't do that. Don't do that. And I didn't realize, because I've not dealt with such a small district, of this one minimum. The reality is you put these 3 kids back up here, you have now lost money. Yes, you might have gained efficiencies with teachers, which is a hard thing for you guys to get, but you lose way more than what you would have gotten the efficiencies by keeping the school there. So that's why it's super important that we try to work on trying to get some more kids in there. But reality is whatever it is, whoever's up there right now, this is going to pay for that. So that's kind of where we are right now with that. So the other side of this, so when it's all out, this is all getting last year's 18.21. You'll see this negative 7.76 there. So let me explain protection. I'm going to go off on a tangent here for a little bit, and it'll kind of make sense when I talk to you about it for down the road. So years ago, districts were basically saying, hey, and I'll put an example like Horseshoe Bend when they lost their mill. Okay. Well, you got a whole industry just leave in the middle of the year. All those kids had to leave. So all of a sudden now, what do? You declare an emergency? What happens? And they're like, no, we understand this. So we're gonna help you out. We're gonna protect you as long as you're at 97% of the prior year's funding. Okay, so that's great because you already got contracts signed and all that kind of stuff. You can't go below 97% of last year's funding. Okay, but the one thing they didn't say on that was that that's not paid for by the state. That's paid for by the other districts. So we're funding our own insurance. Okay, which in my land in Nampa, we've always given 2 or 3 of our units to help a lot of the smaller districts, because it's a lot of smaller districts that really need it in every single year. So here's what happened last year. Remember I said we went from enrollment-based funding back down to ADA funding, okay? Well, this system of protection was only projected to only help small districts in these times. And I'll cut to the chase on this. Our district is also protected this year as well, and I'll explain that here in a little bit. But it's only meant to actually go in and help the small districts to really get through it. Well, when we lost all that funding, so we went from 675 units in Nampa alone down to 602. That's the downfall we had. That's how much money we should have lost. Okay, West Ada lost 150 units. Boise School District lost 85 as well, or 90. So when us big districts that manage the entire state basically needed protection, there was no money for protecting, because the only ones that pay for protection were ourselves. So even though I was supposed to be protected at 647, I ended up only getting 621 because I paid in, but then I got some back. It was the craziest formula. And the worst part about it is small districts got hit as well. So this number right here, this 4.17, whatever, usually districts only have to pay in like 0.05 the most. There's very little you have to put in, if ever. This 4 was trying to make it so everybody had to put in, and all the small districts had to basically help the big districts. And even then, the big districts still lost millions. It was $5.5 million just for our district that we lost. That's why I'm saying that whole 145 million just went away. Well, the state did at the end of the year, gave a chunk of that back, 105 million, and said, okay, one-time money, just go ahead and we'll give it back to you. The problem was the years prior, the summer before that, there was a big initiative on that was going to go out in the November election that basically said, hey, you guys got to put $300 million back into education because you guys are underfunding it. Legislators came in the session, special session, did a new law that says we're going to put $300 million in fetching if you guys will just get rid of the initiative. We'll do that. Well, then the governor vetoed the enrollment, which then out of that $300 million that was supposed to get put in, 165 got taken out right off the bat. And now it's just lowered the entire state's average again. So now we've just lost that, it'll never come back, which is a real big bummer where we were supposed to get that, and there's a lot of people upset about that. And that you guys got hit by 0.76. Rough estimate of a unit value is about $150,000. So that's how much you guys had to put to try to help me, which typically never happens. And it just, the whole world of protected support just blew up, and we knew it would, and it just, they didn't care. They just said, we're gonna deal with it this year, and that's what happened to everybody last year. Luckily, it didn't affect you guys too much, but it did, I mean, that's a lot of money for you guys. You know, that's a lot of money that you guys basically went away. Any questions on this? Because this unit concept is super important when I'm going to talk units from now on, not gonna really talk ADA anymore. So if you have any questions, you can still ask other
Tell me
questions
like
later.
good units, like what are, so one is not so good, and that's what you get with the kindergartners. It's just, you end up with a unit of not even one. Is that, and then elementary is 6, and then that other secondary is 10. So when you're talking about your total support units 18, what would a district like yours be?
Oh, we're at, my district, and remember, we have 13,000 kids. We're at 6, right now, we're
Units
at
be the same when
610.
the divisors end up being the same?
My divisors are a little different. I didn't even realize it until I started looking at your stuff. My divisors are higher. So the rural gets a little bit better divisors, a little lower number, whereas we're in an urban district, they're assuming we're gonna have bigger class sizes.
Okay.
So ours for elementary, ours is split by 1 through 3 and 4 through 6. 1 through 3 is like 26-1, and 4 through 6 is like 23-1, and our high schools and secondary are 19-1. So that's the difference between what you guys have versus what we have. And again, this is them just trying to help out the smaller districts, knowing that there's just no way you can support the school if you're trying at the same dynamics that we would have in our non-rural side.
Who advocates for this? Like, who goes to the legislators and says?
That
"Hey, we're a
is,
small district, how do we
ISBA
do
is our
this?"
biggest advocate.
Okay.
So they're the ones that you guys will go to. You guys do that, School Boards Association, and I don't know if you guys went to any of that this last little
They
bit.
put it in November.
Yeah, so they're the big advocates. They're the ones that lobbyist. There's also IHSA, where you came from, right? Or where would you? IASA, right? Associated Administrators. I don't remember exactly what it is.
Idaho Association of School Administrators.
There you go. So they'll be at the State House constantly as well. The school business officials also has a group, and then IDTA, which is our technology group, they actually hire lobbyists as well for their side. So there's a bunch on there. But what's happening on the other side is a lot more happening on the other side with a lot of outside money coming in and pushing some other stuff, which I'll talk later when we go into the future.
Brandon, do you have a trend as far as, did you look in previous years other than last year?
So it's hard for you guys because I didn't even bother to do that, because what you guys had told me is that you guys grew in the COVID because you guys stayed open.
Yes.
So people moved out here, people wanted to come out here, and that's, I say the pond was overflowing because, or they wasn't keeping up because of how many kids you had, because you guys didn't build a school big enough to really handle that, or that
Right.
process. And so I didn't bother with that because that was, the fact that you guys lost, I would have thought there would have been a trend that you would have been somewhat stable from last year to this year. But the fact is, you guys lost quite a bit of kids in enrollment this year, which dramatically affected your numbers.
Right, and just for reference, if we look back like 3 to 4 years, we were up above 21 units.
Yeah.
So-
And that's enrollment as well. So enrollment base also helped.
Yeah.
And so it really, I mean, that's a big difference. Like I said, 150 grand, that's 2 teachers. Right? And so, and being able to do other stuff as well. So that's where it's really tough. And the nice thing is probably that when you had that 300 kids, you guys actually had full classrooms. Right now, you have to kind of team teach some class. You have to do a 1-2 class, I think is what you guys do now, in order to even be able to utilize the teacher effectively, because you have a classroom of 7 and 2. Right? I mean, that's just how it works with you guys. In our world, we hope to get classes under 30. Right? Because you just can utilize the facility more because you have more kids and you build more schools because you just have that, right? So that's just the difference between an urban with a rural. And the state knows that, and there's some different things they'll give you for that. But it's quite a bit. I mean, I'm not trying to be facetious here. If I was only down 15 units, that's a good year for me. I can handle that in my budget. So I have that ability in my $150 million versus this. It's just a little different world for me, and I'm not used to that. So I'm like, well, it's only 150, but wait, I got to keep my mind different. It's Garden Valley. So it's not a huge deal.
In the last meeting, I mentioned to Hannah that it might be hopeful to have like some just basic pie charts or graphs that you can put up in like her report every meeting and kind of track along. And so what I'm gathering from this is that instead of looking at enrollment numbers, which we get in our packet where we can look at that, it's probably more important to group it into the elementary, middle school, and high school and look at the number of units.
You're going to want to look at that and the attendance.
Attendance.
So don't bring it down to the unit per se, because no one's going to understand that. You're going to want to do it in percentages. What I would recommend is you go to, it's like enrollment right now, because you know if your enrollment's, say, 110 for your elementary, and you're saying we're at 95% attendance, and then all of a sudden it dips to 93, 92, and you can do it week by week. Those are the type of things I think you guys would look at and say, hey, what's going on? Why are we so low? Why are we so high? Those are the things that we do. We go down to that granular level and talk to schools like, what's going on? Why are you so far down? In the elementary land, it used to be 96, 97% was on average normal. Now, if we can get up to 93, 94, that's good. And that's with just the difference in mindset with COVID, which is unfortunate. In high schools, if we're at 89 was bad, when we had high schools, always in the 89, 90s was like, oh my God, you're killing us. Now, if we can get up to 90, we'd be happy.
And 90 is required. And we have a policy that states that. So that's why we have an attendance review board and we have an attendance policy is for that.
Yep.
Because that's how our funding is.
Yeah, and and during COVID, a lot of the times you didn't worry as much about it.
Because it was enrollment.
Yeah, it was enrollment, but yet the reality of the situation, you still care because if the kids aren't there, they're not
They're
learning.
not learning.
Right? So I think that's the part that people don't realize is we want the kids here because if they're not here, they don't learn at home. That's not how it works. And so there's a reason that you guys grew because you guys kept the people in session. And we got smaller because we didn't, right? And so kids do better when they're in class. And that's our biggest thing.
I mean, obviously every kid is equally important, but I guess as far as budget wise, the high schoolers, for every high schooler we get, it's equivalent to about 3 elementary kids funding wise.
12-1 versus 16-1. Yeah.
Versus 40-1.
Yeah. 41's kindergarten.
That's kindergarten.
Oh, kindergarten, 16.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so it's
Yeah.
not.
So it's not that much difference, but it definitely helps that, to have that. But here's where I was talking before. You guys have a policy, you allow kids that are homeschooled, kids that are private schooled, whatever, to come play your sports for free. So you're giving them everything that they want to do, and they're not giving you any money. They're actually costing you money because now they're on your sports. They'll say, well, I pay your taxes. Well, we've actually done a survey. I sat down one of the superintendents, and I thought it was Bonneville, but now we can't figure out who did it. They actually, guess how much somebody, an individual pays, an adult individual pays in Idaho towards education right now, per year, not even per month, per year.
$26.
A little higher than that.
I just looked at my tax bill and I do not remember.
And I'm not talking about your property tax bill,
Oh, okay.
because property tax is different, because that only pays for bonds, right, and maybe your supplemental. I'm just talking about your income taxes and what actually goes towards school funding in the state of Idaho. I'm just gonna tell you, because it's fun. $200. Wow. $200 is what goes towards education in Idaho out of your income tax. Because the majority of income tax isn't paid for by individuals, it's paid by business. So sales tax and all that stuff, it all gets jumbled up and then they divide it, even though we're 50% of the budget. 50% of the money doesn't come from income tax. Idaho is one of the least taxed states in Idaho, right, in the union. So if you're in a higher wealth, like Eagle, I think they said theirs was $1,200 for 2,000, I think. and this is where I'm going to get on my soapbox, one of the biggest things that legislators are pushing right now is to do voucher school choice. The other thing is they want to give people $5,000 or more to go to private schools. Well, but you're not paying in, because you're not paying, so you're going to give them money to leave our district when they really are only paying in $200. People didn't do the math. And so that's the thing with anybody that comes and says, well, I pay your
Like
stuff.
homeschooler parents were saying, we want some money back, and they're like, here's $200.
Well, that's
Like,
exactly
and
it.
that's
So I'm
all
gonna
you
pay you
really-
$5,000 when you've only really paid in
Yeah.
maybe $2,000.
Yeah.
So now we're subsidizing that, where before, it just makes sense, right? And people never did the math. And so I've never verified the numbers, but that is something that everybody's bringing forward. It's like, guys, you're not even telling the truth here. But that's where I have to caution you by saying, you're giving them the milk for free, why buy the cow? Is that how it said?
Yeah.
Right?
That's one.
Yeah, so it's like, I'm terrible at those, I always screw them up every time. But here's the reason, so I want my kid to play band, I want my kid to do all these fun things, but I want to be able to keep them home. Well, no, because we pay for all that stuff, we have to pay for these buildings, you're not getting anything from you. They might get a little bit extra in supplemental, but even then, that supplemental is not going towards all of that. I mean, you guys know what all the supplemental goes to, it's very specific. So those are the things you guys have to think about, because if you can get some of those kids to even come part-time, you're gonna get more money for them. Even if you get them enrolled in PE, you got 2 hours or 4 hours, that's all you gotta do. Be creative, get those kids in. And those type of things are the things that will help next year in this funding.
And this year it was a 3-class minimum to be enrolled.
Yeah.
To be,
Randy, I may have heard this incorrectly too. Did you say that our school education takes up 50% of the state's budget?
Pretty close. Yeah, so it's Health and Human Services, I think, which is health and welfare, and that I think is like 47, and we're like 50 something, yeah, 50. We're really high. Yeah, in the general fund budget. Now there's special fund budget, so example, like a lot of the state police and roads and that, they're all paid for, not out of the general fund budget. It's paid for out of dues and that kind of stuff. So it kind of is a weird. But that's, when we're talking taxes, sales tax, all that kind of stuff, that's what's included in that fund, and we're like 15% or so of it. So it sounds like a lot, because gosh, you guys got millions, but reality is we're still the 49th per kid spending in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and even though they've given a lot more over the years for teachers, they haven't given much more, and we're just keeping up with inflation really is what's happening. So, yeah, so that's how it is in Idaho, and that's kind of what we live with. It's real frustrating when you got vendors that come in and say, it's only $9,000, like, or $5 a kid. Well, you don't have that much here. That's a lot of money for us, whereas in, New York that has, number 2 in the nation or something like that per, they're getting $2,700 per kid or something. We're thinking we're at like 6 or 7. So it's weird how it works with this. So any questions on that so far?
I do have a question on
Yep.
the support unit value. How often does that change? Is that a every year change?
So it does, and then the state will do a calculation based on that. And what it really does is they can do it at a big level because they know how many support units they had and how much they gave out, and then they'll just do the divisor and they'll say, okay, it was support unit. Julie Overly, which is the lady in finance that does that, she puts it out every year. What I generally do when I'll try to look and see what it means to our district, because at that point in time, when we start looking at it and say, okay, we lost money here, but this number also, and you'll see in other things, this controls our funding for college and career. This also controls our funding for our technology. It also controls our funding for other things as well, remediation. There's different ways that it controls. So it's not just this formula that affects our salary. It affects all these other things that they basically attach to it as well. So,
Randy, can you just clarify again how tax dollars are kind of funneled through when we're looking at our bond and our levy? There's a lot of confusion of where the tax dollars are coming from, and bond and levy is from property taxes. The rest of our expenses is funded.
correct. So you said it well.
Yeah.
So right now, everybody's getting their property tax bill and they're freaking out,
Mhm.
right? The one thing people don't quite understand is your property bill is probably, you paid the same dollar amount, if not less than what you paid before. There's a couple different reasons for that. One, the state's done a lot of stuff to try to reduce property tax, and that's the legislation over the last couple of years. The other reason is, you guys, I think your levy is 400 grand, right?
Yes.
So $400,000, right? That's what you guys asked for. Well, if property values expand, you're still only getting 400,000. People think, oh, my rate's gonna increase because you're gonna get so much more money because my property, and you're gonna, no, it's still $400,000. So as long as your value doesn't go up higher than other people's value, you're still paying the same dollar amount as what you were doing before. And then growth in an area will actually reduce that dollar amount. So if you look at your per dollar amount, it's actually less now than what you were paying probably 3 or 4 years ago, right? And Stephanie said it well, there are usually 3 to 4 parts in any kind of property tax bill, okay? The first one is your bonds. Well, those are approved by voters, 65% plus, supermajority, which is one of the highest in the nation to do. That's what Idaho does. Makes it hard for us to do anything. The second one is tort. And what that one is it basically pays our insurance, our general liability insurance. And it's tiny. It's nothing. Like in your district, I think it's like 12 or 13 grand. My district is 500,000 or whatever. Okay. And you're looking at my district, the size of the environment's 13 billion. So it's not like that's a huge denominator. Then the other one is the voted every other year supplemental. So the rules of the supplemental is you have to tell the voters exactly what you're going to use for it. You can't do anything else with it unless you do exactly that. So that's one thing I'm making sure is when we set up the accounts and stuff right, hey, what did the supplemental say? This is exactly what you have, and you're required to do it at that. That's all it was. In the past, they basically said we get a supplemental, this is kind of what we want to use, but we can really do it anything we want. Legislation changed that a couple years ago that says you will or you'll give it back. Or you have to go back out to the voters and say, we need to do this, but can you do it? Let us do it. It's kind of a pain.
And there was a lot of contention on that this year. So because money's fungible, right? Can't things just get moved around? So you said we're going to spend $100,000 on K through 12, let's say.
Mhm.
That was hypothetical here.
Yep.
But because of, like, let's say you needed some money from somewhere else because it's all fungible, couldn't you just pull it from a different pocket and move it around?
I understand the concept of what you're saying, but it really doesn't work that way.
Okay.
Because everything is budget, right? And now there are certain things that say, okay, they're like in our general fund money is not restricted, right? So we can decide to do different things with that. And that's this money is our general fund, right? But you got special grants, you got special other state funding that is restricted. So I can't just move something that there is restricted or in there that wasn't in there before, right?
Right.
So with our supplemental levy, once you say what it is, that's what you got to spend it on. So if you don't spend it and you go and put that money and that expense into the general fund, then at that point in time, you've just left the hole that you just now have money that's going to sit there until you do spend it on that.
That makes sense. Understand that, yeah.
Yeah, so the reality is, in the way any good business office is gonna work, they're gonna look at the most restrictive money first, and you're gonna spend that first.
Right.
So in the past, like us, when the supplemental wasn't, you needed to be that way, we try to move, we always have this or anything else we needed with it in case we needed to do that. We never really did that because in Nampa, prior to me getting there, we were 6.5 million in the hole. So when we got help from the patrons and that with our supplemental, we'd always told them, we'll spend it on this and we get an audit on it. So we've always gotten special procedures and audit to show that we paid to use that. But most districts didn't. They just said, I need $3 million or $300,000 and then they just put it towards their general fund and you didn't know where it actually got spent. And that's what your patrons were saying.
Yeah.
So in the past, you're right. So we needed 300 grand. We told you we were gonna do this, but did we really spend it on that?
Right.
It just went into the greater good.
Right.
And that's the tough part, and that's what the legislators didn't like. Nampa, we've never done that. I've always kept it. It said, if we have using it for athletics, here's your athletic budget. And if they didn't spend it, it roll over the next year for athletic budget, for whatever wasn't spent. And that's the thing we're gonna have to look at here, because that law basically changed and said, what you guys told your voters, that's for sure what that said, and we can't do anything with it. It basically restricts those funds from that point in time on.
I'm glad you're involved in this because it's pretty complicated and messy, let me tell you.
It is, and supplementals, and again, a lot of people are against it because again, it's tax dollars. You're already taxing me to death, and that's where you really, we have the same thing, and it's every 2 years. It's super frustrating because those are the things that you're just like, guys, this really isn't supplemental anymore. We really need this. We're getting underfunded. You know, in Nampa's, ours is 14 million. It's a lot, but 3.4 of it is basically salaries and stuff. Okay, if this goes away, I've got salaries, and then we're one-to-one devices, so all of our devices potentially have to go back too, because that's how we pay for them, you know. So a lot of our curriculum is on there, and a lot of our sports is on there, that kind of stuff. So those are the type of things that we have on there that if it goes away, we got to make drastic cuts.
Yeah, I just did your calculation there with your units here times 150,000. It ends up about 2.7 million, which is about $400,000 short of where we need to be to make it.
Yeah, so it doesn't take long. And so, so it's one of those that works. There is an additional one, and we're going to talk about this down the line. It's called the plant facilities levy.
Yeah.
Right? So the reason we're going to talk about this later, and I talked to the bond guy today because we were doing some stuff with it. He had brought it up as well. It's like, you guys don't need a new building. At this point in time, you don't need a new building. Yes, this building's old. You're not gonna. The new money that's come from the state, we'll talk about that later, the 521 money, it's meant for only capital construction, which is new buildings, new big repairs, that kind of stuff, not for maintenance. So they've kind of taken away our maintenance money to do capital, and now we can't use it for that. But a plant facilities money will allow you to do that over time. It's a 10-year levy that then you can use that for maintenance ongoing. And those are the type of things we'll want to look at in the future for some of that stuff. Any other questions that answer that for you?
Yes, and our bond is done in 2028, plus we did the defeasance.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. So once that is done in 2008, everything will go to zero. That's why we want to do a plant facilities at that point in time to maintain our property. So the thing that people realize is as your building gets older, this building looks great. Believe it or not, 20 years, it goes down quick. I mean, this roof's going to be replaced probably in the next 5-10 years. That roof is going to be at least $3 million. And then you think about just lights, you don't think about carpet. The carpet in this building is going to be $1 million minimum just to replace. You guys can't do that.
And our units on the roof are already.
Yeah, and our HVAC, HVAC's used the last 30 years. I mean, you look at your house. I mean, now they say you get 10 years out of it, you get lucky. I mean, and so it's the same thing, water heaters, all that stuff that goes out. And those things are just expensive. And now the new rules of what they've done is really kind of hamstrung. They thought they were doing a good thing. They didn't realize when you created this big massive bond that there's rules on it, and hopefully they fix it this year, but we don't have any hope on that. So it's kind of a fun adventure. So yes, but it is good. I mean, Nampa's out, next September is our last bond payment as well. So we tried to go out for a bond and it failed miserably. So, and no one's passing bonds right now unless you're overflowing beyond belief. And so it's the world right now, and taxes is tough. So any questions so far on that? And I'll go to the next one.
Do you have one quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Henry? So I thought those numbers were based off of midterm,
That was our midterm, yes, from last year.
but midterm is for payroll. Did you say midterm was for payroll?
Majority of it's payroll, yeah, and I'm gonna show you how that works here in a second.
And I thought payroll was based off the FTEs.
Nope, it's based on units. So, and this is how it works, and it's very fun and confusing. They like to make it as hard as possible, and I'm gonna expand this
FTEs
a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Also here.
Still a term used, but not.
I know this is really hard because if I make it too big, and then I can't be back and forth to tell you where it's at. So this right here is what's called the salary-based apportionment. Okay, this is how we get paid for salaries, right? In your guys' world, you guys pay almost a direct one-to-one for what the state gives you versus that. So you guys are in a much better position than Nampa. We pay above that. So just because we get this doesn't mean that's what we're paying. So the two are not connected anymore, which is, it's never been that way for Nampa and the bigger schools. That's when they created this career ladder that really helped you guys. Yes.
Well, the other thing is that we do pay exactly what the state gives us, but that means we don't have any extra either. So we don't have additional funding to pay for additional teachers. That is our overage typically.
Correct. And usually the way that works, and this is how a lot of districts will do it your size,
Mhm.
right? So if you look here, over here, remember that 19.29 I was telling you? This is your little unit right here. Okay? Back in the day, you used to have a thing that was called use it or lose it. If you didn't have a number of teachers that they were allocated, then you lost that money. So you had to buy that number of teachers. When things went bad in the 2006 and 7, 8 time period, they basically said, okay, we'll let you go down in teachers so you can basically spend more on teachers but have less teachers, create bigger class sizes, just to be able to do that, right? And then IEA, Idaho Education Association, all the teachers got mad, saying, you're taking our money from us. So they did this calculation right here, and you guys are at 755. It started at 9. That as long as your average class size is more or less than 50% of the people in your group, which is your group is small group, then at that point in time you stay with, you can go up to 7.5% less of the number of teachers for that. And I'll explain that here in a little bit. But it's kind of a weird little formula and stuff that you guys are in a good position because you're not. So the way this works is your midterm support units here is times by these ratios. Administrative, that's obviously principals and that kind of stuff. Instructional, that's people in the classroom, and pupil services. And these are like your counselors, nurses, those kind of things. You guys contract some of those out, but it doesn't matter, okay? This used to be combined back in the day. They split these out because at one point in time, they were gonna try to do 2 different salary schedules and that kind of stuff. It got too convoluted, so they just left it. So these are kind of just made up numbers, and it really doesn't make any difference to anybody, but it does down the way a little bit. So what that does is you see, with that allocation, you get 1.44 admin, you get 19.6 or 19.7 instructional staff, and you get 1.52 pupil services staff, right? And then you also get, for the non-certified, 7.23, that's your classified staff, that's your office staff, that's Debbie, that's all of those people, right? Not paid by Title I or anything, this is just general fund, remind you. And then it goes here, and then here's where it gets additional funding for you. I've never seen this before because I'm not used to this stuff. This was what was explained to me by Julie Overley that says, wait, don't take away Loman, don't take away any of this, because this is where you guys get the benefit of it. This, for anything less than 40 units, which you guys are 19 units, you get an additional 0.5 in administrative, and you get an additional instructional, 0.5. You also get an additional, because you're under 20, an additional 0.5 for teachers. Because they realize there's just no way you're gonna have a decent student class ratio because you just don't have enough first graders even in your area to do it, right? That's just kind of how it works, right? So they give you an extra 1.5 units, and this one's an expensive one because that's an administrator, and they give you this too. So not only do you get benefit of that Loman one that I was showing you before, where you got 1 unit, even though you didn't really deserve 1 unit because you only had 3 kids last year there, you also get these benefits as well. So that's where the state comes with the smaller unit stuff. And that's where it helps, all right? And so it basically, so now you guys get 20 and 20, and this is what your actual FT was last year. You had 20.5, 2.33, and 0.5 of these. I didn't verify any of this stuff. This is where it is. This is the information you guys have in your system that goes to the state. They look at it and they just kind of, it all develops that stuff. All right, so you guys are good. You guys are good all the way through. And then there's this thing over here. It's called average salary. Let's talk about kind of the admin first, because admin is different than the teachers, okay? The admin is based on a staff index, okay? And what that means is how many years you have, and each one of those years and how much your education you have gets you a certain divisor on that. And the higher education, the higher years, you get a higher divisor, right? So it goes all the way up to 2 or stops at 1. So if you're a brand new administrator with 0 experience and 0 schooling, which you could never be an administrator, you would get 1 here, right? Well, last year you guys were 1.82 or 1.83. And so whoever your administrators were at that time had very good schooling and had a lot of years experience. Okay, so it was real close to 2, right? And then there's this base salary. So this base salary is a number devised by the state. It's just an arbitrary number that's out there that they come in every year. They say, we're gonna give you a 3% increase. Well, it's not based on the total amount. It's based on this little dollar amount. So we're gonna give administrators that, but you know you're paying your administrators more than 43,000, right? Back in the day, for our classified, this used to be 24. So for my salary, I got $24,000 from the state. I can tell you I made a lot more than $24,000, last year. And this is our IT and all of our people like that. A lot of people you just couldn't pay. They raised this exponentially this last year. I mean, the biggest we've ever had for classified raise. It was amazing. And we were happy, okay? But that's how the administrators work. So for each administrator, you're only getting $78,000 or $79,000 for their salary. Most administrators are getting paid way more than that. So in our world, our administrators start way higher than that because it's just in rural versus educational, in that and versus urban. All right, so that's how that works there. So does this actually work?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, that's good to know. I didn't know it was smart. Oh, this is a smart board. I didn't even realize it was a smart board. Okay. So now what happens in education, I mean, for the teachers and the pupil services now, they went to, back in 2015, they went to what's called the career ladder. You keep hearing the career ladder all this time. And what it's basically done, it used to have a grid that a teacher was going from 0 to 13, and it went all the way from BA plus 24, BA, masters, and then all the way over the side to where you had a doctorate. They would give you a divisor similar to the way the staff index worked. Well, they switched everything and said, okay, we're going to shorten that down. And basically the way it works is you've got a level now. It's a career ladder that starts at, it's called an R1, residential 1. It goes residential 1, 2, and 3. Those are our brand new teachers. You're guaranteed to make a certain amount of money. And that's where the states put a majority of their new money. They said, we're going to give incentive for all these teachers to come out. We need more and more people to come in. So they gave a lot of money at the beginning, the stages, and bumped up our beginning salary used to be $30,000, and now it's 43 something or something like that now, based on the career ladder, right? And that's in law. It's a statutory law that gives a guaranteed increase each year. And then along with that, then they start going into like what's called the professional, P1, P2, P3, P4, P5. Each one of those are now. So in effect, what they've done is they've said you can go from a brand new teacher to the highest paid teacher for many years in 8 years, when before it used to take 14 years. Well, think about those teachers that were 14 years or 13 years. It's like, it's taken me this long, and now they're going to get there in 3, and they're going to make as much as me. It really kind of frustrated a lot of teachers. So they tried a couple different things. At first, they used to do this master teacher premium where you did some extra stuff and you got some money. And for some reason, they didn't like that. And so what they finally did last year, the year before, they went to what's called an advanced placement, I think is what an AP 1, 2, and 3 is what it is. And it just gets a little bigger each time. And so in order to get to that level, you have to do additional things. You have to basically have 75% growth. You have to have 2 out of the last 3 of your evaluations had to meet all the requirements of the Danielson model. And it just went all these different things in order to get to this advanced placement stuff. And so in that world, that gets you into the next generation. So the higher end teachers now have ability to move up again. So what was happening is the new teachers are getting money that the higher end teachers were barely getting anything. They were getting like $200 or $300. New teachers were getting like $4,000 increases each year. So and if you guys own businesses and that kind of stuff, you know how well it is when you had to go through and you had to hire somebody at $13 an hour, but you just hired somebody 2 years ago at 13, and now they're making 14, but now this person comes in at 14. You know how well that worked out for you. That's what our teaching profession was getting, right? But now in order to get to the AP range, you have to do a lot of work, and some teachers get really upset with that. The work with you guys is that because you guys pay out the career ladder, if they don't do the work, they don't get paid. Because you're like, well, you didn't get the stuff, so I can't give it to you, right? So in our world in Nampa, we don't pay off the career ladder. We get increases regardless. So if they don't do the work, we just don't get the money. But they want the raises. So it's a fun adventure for us. Yeah. So what that does in this career ladder, and I'll show you how it works down with our actual numbers here. So the career ladder actually they'll average how many FT you have and how many and what each one of those do, and they give you an average number here. And that's what your averages are right now. So it's and then that's how much you're going to get. So last year they gave us $1.1 million, another $84 million. So you add those together, about $1.2 million for salaries, for teacher salaries. Plus you got $153,000 for your administrative. And then down here, for your sort of classified, you got $280,000. So that was the money they gave, right? But then they said, okay, we're gonna look at what you got, but we're also gonna compare it to what you actually paid. Because if you actually paid less, we're gonna only pay you less than what you actually, so they basically do an analysis to make sure, and look what happened. You guys' actual was less, so they only paid you less. So this is the bummer of really understanding where you're at. And this is back to the use it or lose it. So wait a second, so what you're telling me, oh, so in the end, you got lucky because you paid so much more in your non-certified, your classified, you were more, so they still paid you the 1.6. But if it was only based on this number down here, you would actually have paid less. And the reason you probably paid less here is because you hired less teachers than what you were actually affording, usually. And that's usually what happens. You guys hire less, that gives you a little bit of leeway in some of those numbers, okay? So yeah, but look how much more, even then, you guys were paying $600,000, double. And that, remember I said that this was an increase of exponential, like 30% increase? And you guys were still paying that much to classify. And that's when I came in and I was like, whoa. You need what? You have how many people doing this, and this? I mean, it didn't make sense. For a district this size, some of the positions, the top end positions that were in here. So I think, and this is my opinion, I don't even know how it went down, so I'm just giving you my opinion. I think what was happening last year is that superintendent kind of saw that and said, we're overstaffed in certain areas that we needed to deal with. And that's kind of what happened, is we needed to maybe try to bring some of this in, and I think that's the whole conversion to Skyward was happening, because he was going to bring it back over to his bookkeeper to be able to do it. Because reality is, like I said to you guys, your school is smaller than half of one of my elementaries. So it's like, to have the positions at the dollar amounts that you were paying for a business manager, HR director for 200 kids school, it just didn't make sense. And that's where Hannah's been really trying to focus that, put more money into education, and instead of having to do stuff in that classified realm. And that's where maintenance and all that stuff, we really got to look at, is it beneficial to have a full-time maintenance guy? And I'm not saying to get rid of anybody, that's not what I'm saying. But those are the things we have to look at, because look how much more we're spending versus what we're getting. Yeah, and for years, that's not been uncommon, right? Because they gave us so little for classified, but still, that's pretty big in relationship. And now that's going to be a lot less, because there's a lot of we got rid of already, and some of these people left, and we hired at lesser rates and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what we're looking at. Those are the things we look at for the future. Here's the other thing that was fun for last year. Not anybody's fault here. See all these little blue things here? Mm-hmm. This is when the state said, hey, you got all these people here. These are all teachers that are not teaching. They don't have the right credentials to teach what you guys are doing. Or they're not even credentialed at all. So guess what? Even though we said we'd give you this money up here, we're going to take it away down here. So in the end, I think they ended up taking, this said 350 grand, 315. I think in the end, you ended up losing about $150,000, because both of them, they really had the stuff. The people before didn't get the information in on time. The state kept saying, get it in, get it in, get it. They got one in, they gave them a break because it was a little late. And the other one, they didn't get it in on time at all. And so they didn't make it. So they ended up taking money from you. And 150 grand, that's a lot. I mean, I get mad when there's like, was it how much?
It was 2 positions.
It was 2
that
positions.
we were not funded.
Yeah, 2 positions were not funded. 2 teachers' positions weren't funded. And the risk you have is what the state could have also done, is they could have also looked at all those at the ADA associated with the classes, if they were high school, or those middle elementary, and basically not given those that ADA. But I don't think they did that. They just hit you here. That's the risk you have when you have people that are in the wrong positions. And that's why it's super important to actually know that going in, or what their credentials are. And that's the stuff that Hannah's been dealing with nonstop since she's got here, to make sure everything's right in order to, because when that happens, I mean, you're already tight as it is, and now you've already hired somebody with the contract, and the state just said, sorry, this is how the rules are. Right? And so, yeah, so that's how it ended up last year. And so that's last year's stuff. Any questions?
Well, I just want to clarify that our budget is based on what we thought we were getting. And so when you're looking at the budget, it isn't completely clear. because it was based on what they thought we were getting, and then we find out later that we weren't funded for certain things. And so that's also what we're seeing.
Yeah.
That Hannah spoke about, is that though we look at it like we have a starting budget of a certain amount, we don't, because we already took this loss that we weren't aware of, because the budget was established based on that.
And here's the worst part. I don't have definite, I've got some numbers, like today, I'm gonna give you some numbers of where we think we are. We have a whole month to fix this. We don't know for sure what this is until January.
Yeah.
So I don't have it defined until January. I got some reports now, because we just turned in our first in the middle of last month. The 15th of November was when it was due. We had Thanksgiving and all that stuff was in. And so all got turned in, but we get the first reports out of what this number is now, okay? This one, we don't even get the final number until July. So the year's actually done, and then they finally give us their numbers.
And you've already
Spent the money.
Yeah, and you've already
Submitted
submitted
the
your
budget.
next year's budget.
Yeah, it's a terrible system. Yeah, question.
Do we anticipate having any of these staffing with goals based on our current hires?
There,
That you have no
Go ahead,
control
I'll
over,
let you
didn't
answer.
hire anyone for this year.
No, in fact, I've been working really hard to make sure that that's not the case. All of our credentials for our employees have been approved, with the exception of 2 emergency provisional hires, and that has to go through the state board, and they will approve that this month. I don't anticipate that there will be any holdbacks on that. So we should be getting fully funded for all of the certified positions.
Yeah, and that, I will give credit to, that was one first thing I even met with Hannah when we first met. It's like, and I think we were cut last year. She didn't know how it was cut, but you knew there was people that the state had told you. And that was, she from day one was like, I'm not letting this happen again. So she's been really good. But it's not easy. How do you hire somebody around here that,
Also,
I mean, if they don't want to live here, I mean, they can't afford it sometimes.
that is another thing I wanted to just say, is that the balance is difficult. We have, like, when you talk about, we pay the career ladder, yes, and so Nampa districts may be paying more than the career ladder. That is maybe not great for the district budget, but it does make them more desirable. And so, like, for us, it's hard for us to compete. It's hard for us to retain employees. It's hard for us to get them to apply, because we are not paying more than the career ladder. And that typically is part of the
Yeah.
problem with
In
recruitment.
And sometimes you guys will actually make some concessions, right?
Yeah.
And there's a few that were like, hey, there's a few that like, hey, I can't make it for that. And then it's just really, it's an option on your guys' end. You can always pay more. You just can't pay less by law in certain areas.
Yeah.
And so it is frustrating. And where you guys are in a very tough environment to find housing and it's just really tough to find good quality people that are willing to move here. McCall has the same issue. Cascade has the same issue. Blaine County, which is Sun Valley, has an even worse issue, but they're luckily they get additional money similar to Boise, where they can pay a little bit more because they get additional money from the taxpayers for different things. But they still have to pay. I think Blaine County, I think they pay the most in the state, just because they're just so expensive to live in those areas. McCall is the same way, but McCall's under the same constraints you guys have. They don't get special funding. So at that point in time, they got to compete, and hopefully somebody's living there that wants to live there and just likes the environment and is willing to take less just to live in that environment.
We
It's
do
just,
have,
it's a
like,
tough
hard
one.
to fill for a few of the positions, but it is just been the norm over the recent time period.
Yeah, and what Nampa did, because one of the things we're having the toughest trouble with is special education. So, and there are so many districts within our region that you could just drive another 20 minutes, you're in another, 5 minutes, you're in a different district, right? So we're always competing. So special ed is our hardest one. We came up with an incentive plan this year. If you have so many kids in a certain thing, that we have a way of paying extra for those, because when we took that out of discretionary funds, because we knew this was important to us to keep our special education, because it's just, you get trouble.
Right.
Like, and you all of a sudden get sued, and before you know it, special education is the one area that they'll come down on you way harder than anything. So,
Which is one reason why you may look at our staffing right now and say, oh, they're overstaffed with special education staff members, but because of the requirements that we have with the State Department and our caps in the Department of Special Ed, we had to staff.
yeah, there were requirements, which are high. I mean, the ratios that you guys have in relation to us are high, but and even trying to get the people.
I mean, I don't even know how you get a SOP here. You have to contract them and then they got to drive in and they cost even more than what we have to pay because they're driving in. And those are the type of things that are required by law. Once you got an IEP, you're required to do it. You can't not do it. And if you don't do it, then you get caught and then you get paid penalties and you got to deal with what you guys are dealing with right now. So it's a real, the special education is probably the worst funded thing in the nation. But even in Idaho, they're looking at trying to push some more funding, and they've talked about it in this next session. That's one of the areas they're trying to hit, is trying to get additional sped funding.
Another quick point of clarification is while we do fund based on the state salary schedule and that career ladder, we give the additional 6,359 stipend to all of the certified employees, and we're only funded that amount for the state funded employees. Not all of our certified teachers are funded from the state, so it does end up in part coming out of the general fund.
Yep. Yeah. So it's tough. And what she's talking about, because I didn't mention it, 6359. So the governor in that whole thing is like one of the things he was doing with the $300 million I was telling you before. He basically said, we're going to give every teacher $6,359. So in his mind, he was like, and there's some other things that are based on the number of FTEs. So we all thought, sweet, every one of our FTE going to get an additional $6,300 that we're going to be able to put towards salaries. The problem was when they went through and all the laws and stuff, they did it based on units, not the number of teachers they gave you. So here's the problem. They gave you 22.21, so they gave you this many teachers, and you hired that many, but you're only getting the 6359 based on this. So right then and there, you guys are already down money. And that's exactly how everybody's like, wait. We can't give it all. And they're like, why? And so we have a report that's due that I have to show how much of that we actually paid out to people. You guys are nice because you guys paid out to every single person that amount, right? And that's just how it is. And you almost had to in this environment. And I don't care what you have to do. The reality is the fact that you guys can pay at the level you do and keep teachers is amazing, in my opinion, because these are amazing people that are willing to do that. And so I was expecting to have to pay quite a bit more. And the district couldn't afford it, but that's basically what I thought, just to be able to get teachers here. So it's not a huge dynamic, but in our district, I have 750 sped teachers, and I'm only getting paid off 609 units, right? So that's a big difference. And every one of those teachers wanted their 6359. We're like, yeah, that math doesn't work, right? So it's a real big bummer. But that's what happens. What the governor says, and they're like, hey, we're going to get all this money, and that's all that. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, it's like, but that's not how they funded this, and people don't realize that's how it funded. It was such a hard negotiation now because we have a union and all that stuff. It was just so hard to get people to understand that no, we'll give you what you have, but this is what we got. This is the formula. We can't do anything different. So it was making it hard. So, any questions on this?
Guess I'm just trying to summarize it all in my head.
Yeah, we only talked for an hour. I don't understand why.
All it boils down to, though, is back to the enrollment. So
You're correct.
all of this stuff in the spreadsheet is all based on the number of kids that are here, and then you figure out how many FTEs, and then you can, based on the qualifications of your staff, that index goes up the higher they are. So we get more money. It might look like we're spending more, but we're funding these positions. We get more money for them based on their qualifications. So I guess in my mind, for a board, like we just got to figure out how to increase enrollment. Like
that's a number one thing. It's enrollment and attendance, yeah. And attendance is hard because you don't want kids getting sick, because then they'll bring. And then what will actually happen as well is you'll get a big sickness. I don't know if you guys got it, where half your freaking school's out. Right? What?
Not yet.
Yeah, knock on whatever wood or whatever the hell. Yeah. Now, again, you guys are past the point where it hurts you, because the best 28 weeks, that might be a week where it's not a big deal, right? But if you have that hit your school and you got 20 kids out, this is where you might actually hit a snow day.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? We're going to call school. We have, and there's districts that have done that. So we're 40% out.
We've had to do that.
And
Just not this year, yeah.
And exactly it, because you want to do that, because at that moment in time, it'll kill your unit calculation if you don't take those things in consideration. So you don't want kids to come sick, but you also don't want them to leave. So that's where districts have been creative and trying, especially when COVID hit and now after. So it's a lot of districts still have devices that if they allow them to take them home,
there are districts that will try to work with kids to get on and do stuff, and the state will allow some of those to be able to count it as ADA. It's creativity is what it is. Some of those I'm a little suspect. Just because the kid logs in doesn't mean he did anything, but yet you still count it there all day.
Are you talking about like a version of self-directed learning?
Yeah, but the hardest part for teachers to
In
do that,
elementary, that'd be tricky, right? Like-
it is. Well, so in Nampa, during COVID, we sent our iPads home. It was the worst thing ever. They got broken, they got stolen, they got whatever, right? We got half of them back. We got all of our power cords back. We lost a ton of money. So we decided, nope, we're just going to leave those in the district. So we can't do it for elementary because our kids will take their units home, their device home. But our secondary does. So in secondary, we can really do that. But the hardest thing is when a teacher, you guys probably didn't feel it because you were there, but when the teacher's trying to deal with kids that are in session and kids that are out of session and trying to do that work, it's impossible. It's just not effective. But a lot of districts, one of the things Bonneville does is they are a 5-day school week, but they really only go 4 days. The 5th day is a self-directed learning day. They're able to count that day as attendance because it's self-directed and it's all devices and that kind of stuff. It's a weird thing that they do, and then some legislators really like it. But there are creative things you can do. What CUNA does, I believe, and I haven't researched it for a while. Last year, what they were doing is like any kid, they would call them and say, "Hey, can you at least get on and kind of follow up on some stuff?" And then they would count that. So they would really try to make sure that they were really trying to get that information in the system to say, okay, at least I got a half day for them, or I got a full day. And so those are the type of things that they did to try to keep up with that. You guys might be able to do that because the little size you have, you might be able to manage that a little better. Those are the type of tricks that we'll want to look at and see going forward on those things.
Well, and I'll be honest, my kids' attendance rates are poor.
It's your fault, Kay.
It is bad, but I let them do it. And the reason why, well, for one, my daughter missed the first week of school because I'm like, well, it's just review or whatever. And it's the end of the summer, they wanted to go on a trip. She did 4-H, so she sold her pig. And then yeah. That's why she missed. My son does a lot of IDLA stuff. So IDLA, it kind of stacks up, and all of a sudden he's in panic mode because he doesn't have his stuff done. And I'm like, take the day off of school and work on all IDLA at home all day.
Yep.
And so we've done a lot of that.
But now you realize what happened with their funding.
Yeah, I'm sure other parents say.
Well, and the bad thing is your kid probably gets good grades.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, so like my kid, like my kid, he's doing really well in school, but it's like, it should be a mastery base. As long as they're getting good grades, why does it matter in attendance? And that's what we've been trying to say as not me, is what educators have been saying. It should be mastery based. As long as they figure it out, we can show they have mastery in it, then it shouldn't matter what their attendance is. I don't need him to sit in a chair and have seat time if the kid knows how to do calculus already. Let me just teach them, and then I'll deal with the kids that can't. But they're just very stuck in their draconian ways of, nope, they have to be in seat. They have to be in seat. That's the only
the
way.
Prussian way of
It really is.
educating, right? It comes from that Prussian system. And
Get the ruler out, go there. Yep.
So just for the little tricks, because we have to do little tricks in our district.
Yeah.
So if my kid goes on a trip for a week, 4 days, and this is 4 days, which hurts the attendance. And I might justify it as a parent, I'm like, we're gonna go out of the, down to Argentina, he's gonna learn things that he couldn't learn in school, right? And you can justify it this way, right? But I don't wanna hurt the finances of the whole school because would there be a way right now to say, all right, Charlie, you check in with your 3 classes in the day while we're traveling, because we could be on Wi-Fi, and make up for that attendance.
So my understanding, and this is something that Hannah could probably follow up with West Data, and I could try to follow up as well. West Data actually has a thing like that, because if you're in West Data, you have a lot of rich kids that do a lot of that stuff. They'll leave for like a whole month, right? It's not uncommon for them. So they'll get the stuff that's happening, and they'll do it on their own, self-directed learning, and they'll turn that in regularly, and then they'll be able to get the credit and the ADA for that. And the state's allowed that. So I don't know what their rules are and how they do it, but there are ways of doing that. The one thing they don't allow, like our district, Nampa, will do a Saturday school. You've missed so many days, you're not going to come into Saturday school. They don't allow that. That is like, no, if you missed your day, you can't come back and say you came on Saturday, and then they don't allow that. But if you're ahead of the game and your kid has really tried to do that and tried to be like, I know I need to go get surgery on my knee, but I'm just going to be sitting in bed. Can I do my homework while I'm doing that kind of a thing? Those are the type of things that the state's kind of been lenient on to be able to do those kind of things. You just got to have policies that you have in place and procedures and how to monitor it and manage it, and that's what the state does. I'm pretty sure West Data has that. If you wanted to look into that and see what is that policy and how they deal with it, because it's a pretty cool thing they kind of created.
And we do have accommodations that are made in like that type of situation where there might be a health issue, or 504 or something in place for that. And then the way that we've been addressing more of the self-directed learning is through IDLA and through some of our highest level students are taking college classes or dual credit classes. Some of them are specifically directly through the college, but they're doing them self-directed at home. We're still able to claim that attendance. There are rules with that.
Yeah, IDLA, not necessarily though. You got to watch out for that because it's not through your district. The dual credit, yes, because you're still one of your teachers. The IDLA is an entirely different school, and they get the credit for that. They get the money.
So they, that is how we've been allowing their self-directed learning, and that's a policy that went in place last year.
And those are the type of things, as long as the state allows it, go for it. Because reality is what the whole goal isn't, that we're not trying to steal or any of that stuff. The reality is we just want the kid to get learned, and the state's draconian laws are just stupid. So let's find a way around it that and the kid can learn, get the good grades. We're not going to give them a good 8 or just because, but they're doing the work, but it doesn't necessarily mean they have to be in a seat to do it. And that's the type of stuff. We just got to get creative and those type of things. And it's easier said than done. My district's been trying to do it for years, but we have so much poverty and we just get lucky if the kid does anything and comes to school, let alone, do stuff at home. And hope the parent doesn't even sell the computer when they take it home. I mean, that's not uncommon, believe it or not. We have more than you know. And so it's those type of things. And the other thing we also did is we started an online school. So at that point in time, when kids want to do that, okay, switch to our online school, and then they'll go there. So our kids that are maybe not probably fit to be in the school on a regular basis, instead of suspending them, they go to our online school. Those type of things. And so you have somebody that monitors that. And the online school has it different because that's all alternative. And at that point in time, that has a better pay range to get more money that way. And there's some different rules with that as well. So those are different ideas that you could think of.
We do that with our London school right now.
No, if you did that and you didn't have your physical school, at that point in time, you
Could we-
lose money.
Let's say we had like 3 kids going to London now, so we've got solved that problem. But that teacher's not overly busy with 3 students. Could we also assign that teacher to be over the online one? So that kid that goes, hey, I'm just going to drop out and do homeschool. We go, oh, it's okay.
Yep.
We're going to provide education for you at home, but through this online school.
Yep.
We still get credit for the ACA.
You're exactly on the right path.
And that kid gets a better education than they would just slumming it at home where the parent goes, yeah, just do something.
The hardest part to worry about is to make sure the teacher has their credentials. So in elementary through 8th grade, they might have a K through 8 credential, but they might only have a K through 5 or 6, right? So obviously that teacher couldn't be instrumental in helping a kid that's going to drop out of high school. And in high school, it's so much worse. In middle school, it's not so bad because you can do K through 8 and they can get 1 credential. But once you get into high school, they have to have math credential. They have to take a praxis to do all the different things. It makes it a lot more difficult than that. You have to have a specialist teacher in there to be able to get that credit. So that's where it gets harder.
Let's say that Loman person was as good credit as they could be.
Yep.
Can you still count the 3 or 4 students there and the 5 online ones?
Yeah,
you can get
definitely.
8 in that school and a better divisor.
That's exactly right. Well, yeah. So the online will be its own school.
Okay.
So yeah,
It's
so
on
they're
the
not
online.
located there because they do track that separately because when an online has different rules and regs and all that kind of stuff, and they track it. And if you set up an online, typically that's some different things happen with that. But no, if they're not sitting in the set, they don't want them to be shown as in school.
Okay.
So that'd be different because the difference is too. Once you set up an online school, they don't necessarily be in your same city. So during the pandemic, one of the biggest schools that grew the most was Oneida School District out of the lower southeast Idaho. They grew exponentially because they had an online school that everybody flocked to, and they got like 4,000 kids just like that. Yeah, And it was like, yeah, it was crazy out there. Funding formula went up and they're like, oh my God, this is great. And they're like, no. So the state kind of cracked them down a little bit, but that's basically how online's, they basically, there's some different rules with the online that they're trying to do. So, but yes, the concept is fair. I think it's a good concept.
We have part of Fridays every once in a while where teachers will come in and do tutoring, things like that. Is there any way to get credit for that?
No, the only way that is it's on your calendar.
That's like Saturday.
Yeah.
But
So
our
if
part-
it's,
our part
so
calendar
if your
was-
calendar had,
Counted in
so-
the calendar.
yeah, so if your calendar had a half a day on there, like a 4-hour day instead of an 8-hour day, and then that is counted as part of your calendar, and then that is part of your ADA.
I believe when it was submitted, we were able to count to 2 hours.
Yeah, so as long as, so there's some different ways you do it and that kind of stuff, so.
As long as those ones that have the
Mhm.
squares around them. on
And it could be similar to your self-directed learning. So like what you were saying is, so all of a sudden you've got, everybody comes, and that's maybe similar to how Bonneville's doing it. So not everybody comes, but the ones that need it can come and get teacher help, right? But everybody counts as a half day because that's your calendar and they're still working theoretically, right? I'm not, it's weird how people did it and how are still doing it, and the state's okay with it. I'm not saying they're cheating the system at all. And like I said, some of the legislators actually love the way Bonneville does it. So they get credit for 5 days when they're actually only a 4-day school week. We get in trouble in Nampa over 4-day school week. People think it's the worst, but we're doing kind of the same thing, but it's okay. So it is what it is. But that's, I mean, as long as creativity, the state's okay with it, I mean, you're not breaking law. I think you're good to go. Yeah. Any other questions with that, guys? So that's fun, right? Yeah, see? So I told you it's gonna be fun.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Makes you think a whole different way.
Yeah, well, and that's what I want you guys to think about. So how much time do you have here? So should I just go right into this year? Well, let me do one more thing. I'm gonna do one more. This is kind of shows you all the different things. And I'm gonna talk about some of this money that they come through. And I'm gonna go through each one of these. I'm gonna stay back here just to be. So remember I said your midterm was 19.24. Your best 28 weeks last year was 18.99. So it wasn't that big a difference between the two. So it's not like a huge difference. And again, the difference was for your best 28 weeks, you get $19,000 for discretionary. This is your heats, lights, all your other stuff. Any overages you have in expenses or anything else, curriculum, anything comes out of that one. And then your health insurance, you get $21,000 per employee. You don't use the whole $21,000, you can use the rest of it for discretionary. They bumped this up dramatically a couple years ago because they were trying to entice a lot of districts to go to the state health insurance plan. Nampa went. Reason we were able to go is because we were already subsidizing a ton of health insurance as well. So it wasn't that much more for us to go with adding money.
Yeah.
We chose to go with health. It was the greatest thing for us.
Yeah.
It saved me a lot of money personally. I'd say like $300 a month and it's health insurance.
Yeah.
So, but it costs a lot. It's $13,000 a teacher, regardless if they take it or not. So it's expensive. So I have already talked to Hannah about it, and there's no way you guys could do it.
Oh, yeah, with the,
She's like, because at first I saw, I was like, oh my God, you guys could have gone, and then I realized there was a bunch of people that didn't take it. So at that point in time, when you get a bunch of people that don't take it, it really it doesn't make it cost effective, even though you got so much money. So the benefit apportionment, this is health insurance. This is really Percy and FICA. So that's all they're paying for. You don't have any board contracts. You don't have any on the edge. Exceptional contracts, tuition equivalency. This one right here is a weird one because there's a lot of different things in the sped land. There's a lot of different things. And I don't know if this was part of this. Do you guys provide services over to the patch?
Well, they're technically part of our school district. Is that how it works? They're not part of our district, but they're part of our.
They're your impact.
Yes, and the services that we provide are like some of the funding that they get have to funnel through us.
Yeah.
And we do share some PD when possible.
Yeah, and they're kind of like a private school in their way,
They are.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so in that way, a lot of stuff comes through. You'll have in some of your private schools, you'll have an actual different allocation. That's obligated to go to them depending on certain things. The other thing about them too is some of those
you're actually, some of those kids come from, especially in that world, because I think it's an alternative type program, right? Some of those kids will come from out of state. When they come from out of state and you guys are helping them, that you have to build them through an out of state, and that's what some of this stuff is. Or like the foster and the health and welfare sends them over there, but you guys are sending services to help them, those type of things. So we have some of those. We used to have a state hospital that was right there by the golf courses in Nampa that we'd have to send our teachers to go help. We get money from the state, and that's some of these things, tuition equivalency, some contracts, that kind of stuff. It's weird. You guys still got 45 grand. That's quite a bit. I've not seen any of this information this year, and we'll have to work to see if those reports are filled in, because some of those ones that we'll have to look at and see where that money's coming in. And so, transportation. This is a fun one. You guys know we spent more than $201,000 last year.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So here's the worst part. The new funding formula that I saw that they're trying to get passed will actually take an additional 60 grand from you. Yes, I've said something and I'm not happy with it. And I've said a lot. So it's ridiculous and it's terrible and they know it. And I don't think it'll pass through. And they're doing some adjustments with it. But I said, you can't do this to rural school districts. It really blew up the rural school districts anything. This is also going to take $2.5 million from West Ada, which made me laugh, but still, it's one of the things. They just have a short-sighted view on it. It sounded good at first, but it'll kill a lot of the small districts, a lot of the rural. They were losing a ton.
I would love to see the previous year and then the next year.
Oh, I can
Because
show you that.
we went from having like 5 buses to 3 buses and having like our own small
Yeah.
fleet and how much that may have.
Yeah, so the way the transportation actually works, it's based on the average cost per student rider and the average cost per mile, right? And then if you are above 103% on both of those compared to the state average, and you're compared against us and everybody else, then you're capped. And once you're capped, then you can only get so much for those kids, regardless if you've lost, you're dropped. So what's happened a lot of times when you went to less buses, you also lost ridership as well. So your cost went down, but your formula also went down as well. So I can show you, we actually have every year for last year, and I can show every single year of where Garden Valley was. Last year, I do know you guys were capped. And so and because you guys were way above, and almost all the rural districts they're capped because there's just so much cost per rider because you have to go so far to get them.
What do you mean by
In miles, you know what I'm saying?
So I guess,
What is
I hadn't
cap?
thought about,
It just means that they're only gonna give you so much, even though they're reimbursable type miles.
Meaning we have to go into general fund to make up the difference.
Right. There, so just say, so
We
you
give them back,
should have
and we
been,
just
you
go
should have been
for it.
eligible to get $250,000. And they said, no, you can only get 200 based on your numbers because you're inefficient in their water. That's how the law reads. It's ridiculous.
I think we
It's
spent
terrible.
we
almost
went,
400.
we got the fleet, we have 3 vehicles. So it'd be interesting to see how much that saved us.
I think our costs went up.
Like, but, and I'm talking about transportation as a whole, not necessarily what would be reimbursed for transportation to and from
Yeah.
school. I'm talking like sports, right?
Yeah, and none of this
field
is
trips
sports.
and that kind of stuff, yeah.
So just know, none of
Oh,
this is sports.
just
Yeah, because they don't pay for
busing
sports.
to and from.
This is to and from only special ed busing.
So this is what we got from them.
Yeah, this is what we got. This isn't a cost. This is what you got last
So-
year.
How does it work with, like some districts own their buses, like Horseshoe Bend owns their buses?
Yep.
And then we don't, Cascade doesn't, or, whatever.
Neither do we.
Why? And why do some schools decide to buy their own buses and other schools decide to pay huge contracts to
So,
hire?
So I can give you, and I don't know here, so I can't tell you what's beneficial here. I can tell you that Nampa's never owned our buses for the last 65 years. And the reason for it is trying to find bus drivers, trying to deal with all that stuff, and trying to deal, you just can't do it. It's just very hard. West Ada tried for years, and they finally went to a contracted service model because it's just, you're talking, in our world, we got 100 and something routes, right? So you're talking all those different bus drivers, all those different buses. We have 100 different buses. I mean, that's a lot to buy, that's a lot to maintain, a lot to all that kind of stuff. And then usually what happens in our land is we also have to pay Percy, which is an additional 12% on top of their salary. So not only are you paying them $20 an hour just to keep in the market of any other people in the area, you're also paying 12% above that just for salary, right? Well, once you're doing that, that's basically, and you're still maintaining the fleet just like anything else, right? So the reality is, the busing companies that charge you for that aren't necessarily charging a premium for the buses. They're basically charging you that, maybe a little bit to keep up the buses and that. Majority of it's the people. Well, the people cost, they can hire somebody even at $20 an hour, and their profit margin will fit within that 12% you had to pay before. So now you don't have any hassle with it. You get the bus drivers, you're responsible. Any wrecks are your problem, any of that stuff's your problem. And then at that point in time, you just have to make sure you get the kids to and from.
You have to do first and non-certified.
What? Yep. Anybody that's a school employee is required, if you're getting over 20 hours a week, you're benefit eligible, then you are required to pay for CL members.
Well, and let's face it, too, schools are supposed to be educators, not transportation specialists, right?
Yeah.
So it creates another burden on school to put a transportation on it, especially a big district.
Oh, yeah.
A small district, you might find the right person at the school that can manage that for you, maybe.
Yeah.
But that's a big ask.
Yeah, and to be frank on that too, I mean, even Nampa, we've even contracted out our custodial. Because it was just, it's so hard to find, in Boise area, it was just trying to find them, you just can't even find them. So all this company does is they do custodial for a living, so they're hiring and firing all the time, they're just doing all that, that's what they do. And our bus company is the same way. Now, I will say this, Bonneville School District, they're largest in the state now, they do their own. And somehow, I don't know how, they're one of the cheapest in the state per kid. I don't know what they're doing and how they're doing it. If they're not putting everything in so it makes them look good, I have no idea, right? But somehow they're the most efficient one in the state because everybody else that owns have not. Now, the lady who is in charge of the state now, her name is Allie, she used to be, I think, at Gooding School District running her own system and that. And her belief is these districts that are contracted are the ones that are pilfering everybody else's money. It's because of them that the district is having fun and the new laws are literally going against trying to get people to go back to owning. And none of us big districts could do it, nor do we want to. And that's why we're fighting it as well. Because reality of the situation, we just don't have time to deal with that, nor the people, skills. Like it's so hard to do it. And there's a reason why majority of the districts around the nation contract as opposed to own their own buses. And
Not having enough bus drivers, doesn't matter who owns the company. If you don't have the bus drivers, you own the bus drivers.
And it's minimum
community.
2 months just to hire a new one and get them trained up to be able to ride and drive.
They have a problem here.
Well, yeah, that's
Carlos
the-
has the problem.
Yep.
What we're saying
but it's our
is,
community that has the problem. We don't have enough bus drivers in the community.
So we face the same problem. as,
Yeah.
you know,
And the issue
whether we
is,
own our fleet or we don't,
Yeah.
we're still struggling
but
for
here's the,
Carlos to do it or us to do it.
yeah,
But it seems like Carlos has got to make money on this or else they're not going to do it for fun. You know, so there's enough money left over in the profitability of running this and hiring. And what if I'm understanding correctly is the difference of 12% is not worth the risk of running that business
that part I don't
in
know.
a big district.
And the other issue is, remember, you got a big capital outlay by the buses too. Those buses are 150 apiece. So a lot of districts, when they were owning their own buses, they didn't keep up, especially when times were lean. It's like, you know what, maybe we could keep that bus a little longer. Similar to like, maybe we could keep that computer a little longer. Before you know it, you had a 10-year-old bus and now it's not even eligible. Now you have to put out another 150 grand. And, or you got to hire a mechanic now, you got to hire that. Now, the mechanic, you only have 3 buses. So you're going to keep a mechanic busy for 3 buses. How are you going to do that? You're going to contract somebody? How are you going to, in Harlow's case, they might have, yes, they might have a small here, but they might have other ones around that they can now share different things. And they also, like in our world, First Students are our new bus supplier. They didn't have enough bus drivers at the beginning because of the way stuff that happened in Nampa. They shipped in people from California, or in Utah and all these other places where they had people. They brought in buses from all over to get us there because that's what they do.
And plus Harlow's supplements with fire buses too, right? So they have another income stream from that. too.
And that's what it is. So you're kind of hoping, you know, small districts, I don't know, I don't know how anybody's bus system can ever make money. That's what baffles me about Bonneville's. Everybody else is, they've just gotten rid of their own and they've gone contracted. Now, it could happen exactly what happened in Nampa, right at the last minute when we already decided by budget, they wanted a 27% increase. And yeah, so when you're already spending $8 million times 27%, and see how much that would, and wonder why we switched businesses. And it created a lot of traffic, but that's why. But we deal with that ourselves. The state wants to kind of push us down, And that's what we're finding back with the state right now. Because in their mind, if we just owned our own buses, it would be easier because we would control our own costs. That works great as long as you have a good manager and you have a good person that can recruit and keep your bus drivers. The moment in time you have turnover, you're screwed.
It's $185 an hour, by the way, will take your vehicle down to Kenworth or Cat. $185 an hour for shop rate.
Yeah.
It's got a truck back, $24,000.
Oh,
Was,
yeah.
Get the truck back on the road.
Yeah. And see, we have some little white buses. So one of the things we did is we ended up buying a whole bunch of little white buses that are outside of the contract. And our coaches and stuff like that will actually drive those instead. So they'll actually drive those because they can fit up to 14 people on them. And we'll do that. And our bus company is the one that's repairing them for us, and they're only charging $75 an hour. That's what happens when you have an $8 million contract. Right? But yeah, so those are the type of things. So that's how we've done it. And so we've tried to reduce costs that way when they don't have a lot of, because the other thing with a lot of these bus companies, when you only have 1 or 2 buses and you've got 4 sports going on, how do you do that? And that's the issue. And they don't have enough drivers to do that. And there's also a risk that they've driven all day, they can only drive so much work. DOT laws only allow so much. So now you have to drive. So you got those issues as well. And that's why it might be beneficial for you to buy smaller buses and then you train them to drive their own buses. And those little buses are basically, you don't have to have a CDL or anything with those. The hardest part is when we first started buying them, they were 25 grand. Now you can't find it for less than 50. It just gets so many districts had to buy them and you can find them around, but even ours were used and stuff. But it's been working pretty good for our golf teams and stuff that are much smaller than that.
We have 2 buses and 1 van.
Yeah, and the van's the same way. The risk is with the van, it's just a matter of maintaining them, keeping them up, who's good and trained. And the one thing you have to know as well is somebody dies in that's your insurance, that stuff. And you have a teacher, and what teachers don't realize is they're the ones driving it, and they be stupid, they're gonna get caught as well. So they'll get, I mean, it's really for us, our insurance company said, we're so glad you don't own your own bus company. So that's how Morgan was with us. Did that answer for it? But again, it's not that it can't be done, because a lot of districts are doing it. But going back is a little tough, because you do have to buy and train the drivers, get everybody in, that kind of stuff. It makes it a lot harder.
It's been a topic of conversation here for years.
Yes, and our contract is up in May, so you will put it out for bid shortly.
It's
We
up
just
in
don't
May,
have
this May?
much control over,
Oh, you guys should have started a long time ago to get a
We
bid.
talked about it.
Yeah, you
we
guys,
just don't have much control of our expenses as a board, besides maybe that, it's like.
yeah, if you
Like,
guys are
that's a
going,
big chunk and something we can decide versus like, we can't pay teachers more or less or, a whole lot, it's just based off of the FTE, but like our expense, actual expense, it's like one of the biggest, it's the biggest thing.
it's pretty expensive. Yeah, and again, in sports travels, and for you guys, it's even more because you're going so far.
Yeah,
I mean, and the farthest one we have is, I think, for our middle schools is out Emmett. A mountain home, I think. But
so if we bought 3 buses, we
who
might
do you have
save a
to
lot of
drive?
money.
Who do you have to drive them though?
The
So
same
the-
people, we just hire the same people that are, we know who they are.
Hopefully.
Your neighbors.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
so we're just gonna pay you more.
Yeah,
to do the
so
same
I'm
job,
not saying it can't be done.
You know,
And that kind of stuff. So there are potentially, yeah, in your situation, you might be in a good situation. I will tell you this much, if you have not started the process of doing RFP right now, you will not get it done and you will be with Harlow's for another period. I guarantee you. It is a minimum a year to at least do it. Ours is in 3 months, it was the worst thing ever.
We're not gonna give them a bus company here anyway.
You'd be surprised.
We've tried it before, but
I
that's what
bet
we
you for
talked to
students
Hannah
do send
about.
that with us, it's a matter of, yeah, you'd be surprised. with
I'd be
bus
shocked.
companies.
In 2020, we went out for bid in November, and it was difficult to get bids and conversations that were had. They would usually call first and say, do you already have a bus company? And we'd answer yes, and they'd say, well, it's industry norm that we do not go for other people's contracts. And so it was hard to get anybody else to bid on something that already had a contract on it.
That's odd.
Yeah,
Okay.
so that's where we were at in 2020, but I don't know if that will remain the same.
But you're also, remember in 2020 is right with COVID, when all the busing companies,
Yeah.
Were actually, they weren't even driving at that time because there was no school. Right?
Yeah, we were like, it was November, so
Yeah.
2019.
19, yeah.
20.
They didn't hit, yeah. So it is a really tough one, and that's one of those ones, you can do the math and just, I mean, it makes sense what you're saying, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, as long as you can get those people. The moment time one of those don't do well, or you want to get rid of them, you're trying to find a new bus driver, you know how hard it is to find somebody that can do stuff around here now. Try to find a bus driver here.
The one thing I can say is that it is advantageous, like for some of our staff that were, like, we had a kitchen staff member before that drove bus. She
Yep.
did morning and afternoon. And then when she became a para, we just had her duties covered early in the morning and relieved at 3:30 so she could go get her bus, so.
And that's what I think a lot of small districts do.
Yeah.
And my dad was a teacher at Hotel School District for years. He went and got his busing certificate, and so he would drive buses for his golf team. So instead of, he could go get one from the bus barn, and he would do that. And when we were student government, he would drive us to Boise and go yellow bus as well, because he and his friend drove bus. So that's the type of stuff, like you get teachers to learn how to do it as well. So there are things, but it's just the maintenance of it, making sure you can do it. I'm not saying it can't be done, but if you really are gonna go that route, you gotta make a decision here soon. Because you're gonna have, because it takes, just to even get buses, it takes a lot. And now I do know of a busing company that has a whole bunch sitting on their lot right now, I don't know what they're doing with them. But, I don't know if once they knew you were affiliated with me, they probably wouldn't talk to you. So, we're not in a good standing with that.
Thank you for telling me that.
Yeah, so, good people that were here, just bad people that own them.
At some point, not tonight, but I'd like to crunch the numbers on that, because it's the biggest thing that we could have. And it's gonna take some data to make good decisions on.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I'm okay with that. Yeah, I will say this, it might be a thing where we have to travel to a district that's small and
It's
see
like
what the
Bonneville said,
home
what's
one.
the secret sauce here? Like Bonneville and say, what do you do? Like,
Yeah,
how is
well,
this possible?
No, I'm talking about a small district. We need to go to the small
Oh.
district homes, because the reality is
Like
Bonneville's
Horseshoe Bend.
Bonneville's
Say, what do you do?
Bonneville's a whole different story,
Yeah,
because
how
they
does this
have
work out for you
maps.
in Horseshoe Bend?
Yeah, so Horseshoe Bend might be a good example. Is Cascade on their own, or they?
I think.
They use
Yeah.
Harlow's.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the thing, is see, Carlos is around, so their management staff can get float between all the different places, right? So we got one manager probably with multiples and stuff. I don't know how their structure works, so. All right, so I'm just gonna go through a few of these things and kind of explain what they are. College and career advisors, this is stuff Stephanie does. This money is basically meant for any kid 8 years and above, right? That's how the calculation works. Any kid grade 8 and above, you get a certain amount of money per kid. And that amount is basically used to help kids understand what options are going forward. So it's college and career type of stuff. It's like, hey, these are some ideas, maybe take them on a field trip down to PSU or something like that. Those are that kind of things that you guys do there. All right. This college and curriculum money, it's digital, it's kind of a weird little thing, and basically I wouldn't care too much about that. Continuous improvement planning and training. So what this is you guys get up to $6,500 a year for training, right? So as long as you're using a qualified trainer that the state agrees with, then you get $6,500 worth of board training that they'll repay back. The problem is trying to get somebody that's qualified. Now, usually the ones that are qualified, like ISBA, some of those people will come in and train you for doing some specific board stuff. And most of the time, and you used to do it ISA and stuff like that, right? Yeah, so those are the things you want to maximize that. You guys used $5,000 last year. So a lot of times, the ISBA convention that was just had, a portion of that was reimbursable by the state. And so that's where a lot of this would have gone. But I don't know if they went last year or the year before. It's reimbursement, so if you don't use it, you just lose it. And then so if you didn't spend, then you didn't get it. It just means that you didn't do anything with it. This literacy proficiency, these are great dollars. This is millions of dollars for NAMP, and this was helped us get our full day kindergarten. Okay. And really what it is, it's just really based on, there's some different dynamics on the scores, the test scores of your K-3 students. And at that point in time, depending on where they are, you get more money if they're bad testers. Honestly, I'll just be frank with you. So at that point in time, those are what these dollars are. So you get tested enrollment. So different things they have, they give you some additional money for it. This was a big thing with Governor Little, that he put money in. It was like $30 million at one time, and then he bumped it up to an additional $80 million a couple years ago. And this was
at first they were trying to fund some kindergarten. Then they said, nope, it's not gonna go through the House and Senate, so they decided to put money here, which did go through. And then now we can use it for that kind of thing. So
Okay.
those are, I don't know what you guys have used any for, so that's the stuff I'm trying to research. This math and science is a weird one. It's honestly something that's been there forever that they basically, based on the divisor of how many high schools you have, you get a certain dollar amount. And then at that point in time, it helps you to hire math and science people, but it really doesn't do the same thing. And professional development, dyslexia in general, this is based on FTE. So however many FTE you have, you certain number of people, certain dollar amount per FTE you get, okay? I was talking to Allison about this earlier, and she was looking for a screener for dyslexia. So we were looking to say, hey, maybe we can use this dyslexia money and train one of our people to be a screener instead of paying somebody $60 an hour to go do it, right? So those are the type of things that, okay, once you know what the rules are, let's go use it.
Yeah.
A lot of small districts, but we noticed in all the years when I've been trained in some school districts and stuff like that, they think it's so hard to use these monies. But in reality, it's not that hard. The money's out there. You just got to know how to use it. I've never had a problem with any of the money the state's given us and tracking it and using it all. It's really just a matter of figuring out how to do it, what's the rules for it. Remediation is, again, it's similar to this K-3 lit, but this is remediation of all kids. Any kids that are a certain scores on the ISAT and that kind of stuff, they give you some extra money for. Safe and drugs free, what this is the money from the old tobacco settlement. So they give money every year to the state, and then that flows down to us. What NAPA uses it for is we use that for part of our SRO contract. And I believe you guys use it for some of your contract as well. This school district facilities, this used to be called the lottery funds. This one and this one here, the maintenance match and the school district facilities. This is now gone. This is what you guys got last year, and the state has since taken away because they thought it was a great idea to do this new House Bill 521, which they got this massive bond that they were going out to do maintenance on buildings. And then once the bond, all this passed, and they threw, and then they started getting the bond, and the bond people basically said, but you can't do this with maintenance. Only thing you can get a bond for is for capital. So then they told every one of us, we're gonna pay for the bond using our lottery funds, and took away all of our maintenance money to do it, and then basically said, all this new money you're gonna get, you can't use it for maintenance. You can only use it. But here's the caveat. Once you do, and it's for 10 years, right? So you're gonna get a chunk of money, and you're not gonna get it for 10 years again, okay? But in order to get that, and this is where I'm talking to Gary, and we're trying to work with it, there'll be a special meeting that we'll have to do, or part of the board meeting, we talk about the 10-year plan here soon, in order to go through and develop a plan that gets sent to the state, and in that, we'll get about $900,000 to $950,000, okay? What they have said is, you can't use that money unless you get good big projects with it, like an example, instead of repairing an HVAC unit, you replace it with that money. But again, once you use it, it's gone. But what we're doing in NAMPA, we're getting 46 million, roughly 45, 46. We're putting it in a bank account at LGIP, and the money that's made off there in interest, that can be used for maintenance. So that's that, and they specifically said, so the plan I would tell you guys with, unless you have something big, put that money in the account, we'll use that money, and we'll flip, whatever money is generated out there gets used for maintenance. The worry I have is, previous book person in my position here for you guys still bought a budgeted 50 grand, I think, on the budget on that when we knew he wasn't getting it. So I don't know exactly how we're dealing with that yet. That's one of the things I'm looking into to find out how we're going to cover maintenance for the buildings right now. Gary didn't like that too much. He was a little worried. He said, well, we'll figure it out. But yeah, that's 130 grand and you guys aren't getting any more. And that was meant for building maintenance. That's the wonderful world of our legislators doing something they thought was this great thing, underfunded it, and then took away the money. So unfortunately, I have way more to probably deal with that. This supplemental right here, this House bill stuff right here, this is what it was called House Bill. It says House 763, but it was really House Bill 292. And what it was the legislators, not this last time, but the time before, basically said, we want to give property tax relief and we're going to give schools a bunch of money, right? So what they did is said, hey, we're going to give schools all this money and so it'll reduce your taxes. So what they did is they gave us money, in this case, almost 130 grand. And instead of levying the patrons for that money, they gave us that money instead, and we levied less to the patrons. So when we needed, say, $900,000 for our bond and interest payments, we then went to $770,000 for our bond and interest payments that we sent out. And that's the tax breaks we were talking about earlier, where you saw those tax breaks on your bills. That's part of where this money come from. So we're still getting that money. We got about, NAMPA got like 6.5 million last year. This year, you guys got about 137,000 this year. And it'll still continue until it's redone. And it's based on the extra money that's left over from the state. You guys probably heard recently the new Luma system left like almost $15 million on the table that they couldn't take out for tax breaks. That was directly resulted to this money. So it doesn't help you because the rules on that money is if you have any bonds outstanding, it goes towards that first. Then next, if you have any supplementals outstanding, then it goes towards that. And the next, if you have any private facilities money, then next goes towards that. And then then after that, if you don't have any of the three, then that money can go towards your capital projects for maintenance. But almost everybody has bonds, and almost everybody has a supplemental. So either way, it's going to reduce that. So where that's helpful when you don't have bonds anymore, this is what I'm saying. This is where our potential plant facilities, where we're not getting the lottery money. If we were to go out and do a small plant facilities fund, which is only about a 55% approval rate, which isn't that bad, you can then get money over 10 years for plant facilities, which will then do our maintenance for 10 years. And those are the type of things you can also include sports facilities. You can also do things like that in that to say, this is what we're going to do with this money, right? And then that money would theoretically go against that, which then still lowers the cost. You're like, it's essentially free for you guys because now we don't have a bond debt. We're using this $130,000. Let us put this in the plant facilities levy instead. And it costs you nothing more to do it because the state's going to pay it. All we need you to do is approve it. Yeah. It's a pretty easy sell. But Pocatello tried to do it after Highland lost half their building in a fire, and it got voted down really bad because they tried to build a new high school instead of leaving Highland there, and that's killed it. So that was one of the issues they had. This technology here, this one's still there. It's Fund 245. And what that one is it's based on the number of students you have. So the number of students you have times a certain calculator, and that's how much money you get. And that's basically all the money you get from the state to do all your stuff here, which is not enough.
That's not enough.
Nope. And that's where I'm saying it's hard for districts to do any kind of infrastructure or any of that stuff and be eligible, and to be any self-sufficient whatsoever because it's just not enough. And so, and that's where some of the big districts need to help, and they just haven't found a way to be able to help us get help. But in unemployment insurance, don't worry about that. That's other stuff. So any questions on that so far before I go into this year and give you the bad news?
Just keep going.
Just keep going. Rip that Band-Aid out.
So we got 495 last school year from the
For other stuff.
state.
Yeah.
I'm trying to track, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. All right. So I'm not going to be able to give you 100% of all the money yet because I don't know it yet. Because remember I said some of those reports are just coming in. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you what your ADA. That's not one. What your ADA is supposed to be now.
Yikes.
Oh, we went from 15 to 6, or from 16 to 15.
No, you went from 19 to 15.8.
16. Wow.
Sorry, I'm looking at elementary 1 through 6.
Yep.
Did that drop that you did
Yep.
to ISO?
Yeah. So that's basically what's happened to you right now. So this is where this school district is under what's called the protection again. Last year, you paid into protection. This year, you're getting protected. Because you went all the way from 19 units down to 15, almost 16 units. If you were not protected, then you would lose that much money at $150,000 a year. That's how much you're potentially losing this year in revenue.
$150,000 a unit.
A unit.
So that's almost $500,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would bankrupt you guys.
Yeah.
So here's the issue. So that's where you are. So unless we do anything for next year, we have to budget based on this going forward. And that's more cuts for next year. I'm just telling you guys right now. That's big, that's bad deal. So, and if we lose anybody more, then it gets even worse, right? So these are the things that we talked about before. These are the things we need to start working about, how to get kids back, how to do things, maybe online, do something to help get these numbers up, all right? But again, because there's the protection thing, what you're actually going to be protected on is 17.82. Okay?
So our numbers crunched equals 15.9, but with that 7% buffer, was it 7%?
It's 3%, so you can only lose 3% a year. Is what
We
they-
go down to 17.8.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we're
But
down,
that's still,
down about 200,000.
huh? No, they already know what the numbers are. So this is protection right now. So right now, so the first year in the protection, it blew up everything because all the big districts were hit. This is a normal protection year. So now it's really quite small. I mean, like in our district, we paid in normal again. So it's really small and it's only hitting the districts like this that lost, and you guys are one of them.
And this is if we have enrollment at Loman.
Yes.
Which is 1 unit, a full unit.
Yes, you get that full unit regardless if you have 1 or 10, you get a unit there. So do not let that get below a unit, or you lost not only a unit, plus you've lost 1.5 FT, but no, another 0.5 FTE as well. Because remember you had those, remember I showed you on that state apportionment where there was the 0.5, 0.5, and the 0.5. The other one that was the less than 20 kids in the one school.
Yeah.
That was that 0.5 FTE that you got for the local
You
school.
kind of take something that may be tragic and just like makes it 3,000 times worse.
That's what?
Makes it like 3,000 times worse because it's already tragic, right?
I know. So I'm gonna show you the numbers, and I kind of, and this, I've got to work on a little bit more here, but I'm working through it. So this is kind of something I put together for my district. I mean, it's just kind of, but this is kind of where you guys are with budget, and this is what was budgeted last year for this year. This is what the previous regime budgeted for this year. It was 19.24. So they estimated a little bit of a decline, but they had an estimated 40 kid decline, obviously. Because you were protected, you only went down 1.42. Not the end of the world. Right? Yeah, go ahead.
And that includes like all of those other depletions, like the lottery money.
No, this is just state apportionment right now. Stay out of that world right now. This is literally just state apportionment. So at this point in time, this is what we're getting paid for salaries. And so they also, when I looked at this, of what they said, here's what they estimated right here. And this is his little calculator right here that he turned into the state, okay? If you look at what he anticipated for administrative index, a 1.94, he had estimated 56, almost 57,000 for instructional and almost 50 grand for pupil services, okay? Just think those in your mind. This is what we have right now. 1.5 index, 54 and 47. So not only did we not hit our unit calculation, we were also under on our average teacher salary, okay? And if you see where that's at here, just that average teacher salary alone and our unit cost was almost $200,000 a loss in teacher salary stuff.
So this means the amended budget has been wild.
Or if we don't make any changes, it's gonna hurt us big time. So,
We already had the shortfall coming in from the funds that we didn't already, that it wasn't accurate when the budget was created. Right, this isn't reflecting the same thing.
what do you mean by that?
Like as far as like our budget start, like as far as our total funds wasn't accurate based on how many, our shortfall already on the funds that the teacher, we didn't earn.
We didn't get paid.
Oh, yeah, we lost that last year. So our fund balance was low because of that last year. This is all just new based on budget this year.
But our budget this year is still reflecting last year, what we thought last year we had, right?
Yes and no. So what I don't know is how you guys do it. So the way the budget is, a lot of districts do it, and the state does it. They start with fund balance of last year,
Yeah.
then they take revenues, they do expenses and fund balance of this year.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm the type of guy that I don't like to include my savings as a budget.
So my district, I've always said, leave the fund balance out, because revenues and expenses need to match. Because if you're going lower and your fund balance, unless you notice that your fund balance is less than what it was before, you don't realize you basically did an unbalanced budget, right? So I've always got my districts, and you'll see when we do the budget next time, I'm gonna give you the revenue thing calculations, and here's what the expenses are. And so we gotta figure out how to make those two match. Because if not, then you're always giving into some fund in the prior year. And then at that point in time, if you're way off like this, then you go bankrupt. And you don't want to be in the news for that, right? So there are some good things. When I talked to Hannah, some of these things our average is a little low here because there's 2 teachers that we still have to get some data in. So they're giving us basically brand new. It's the SPED director, his 0.5, and the other lady, they're basically giving us money as if they're a brand new teacher. But the reality is they got like 15 years experience. She's one of them. Yeah, you're the other one. Yes, that's right. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. It's just a form that they fill out. And Hannah's working on it. She's got it on her board. And that'll increase. And then the limited number of teachers you have, that will actually showcase, that'll change that dramatically. So even if this goes up, let's say here, so even a $2,000 increase on the average year drops it makes 30 grand in difference. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. It will help a lot. In my district, since we have so many teachers, a $200 difference is like $400,000. So that's how close I have to be to my average teacher in order to make it work. You guys, it's not as hard, and you don't have the turnover as much as we do, so it makes it a little easier for you guys once we do it. Now, in a real regular world, yes, go ahead.
What about the non-classified that were overpaid last year for what we used versus now? Like, how come that's not in?
So this isn't expense, it's just revenue.
Okay,
So I
but
haven't
that
done
is a little
anything.
better.
I don't know. Maybe.
We'll see.
I can tell you right
I
now,
know
your salaries that I see right now are looking good compared to budget.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So I do know for a fact that we are looking better into classified because we got rid of almost $90,000 worth of expenses just in the front office alone. In the position that Debbie took over as a part-time position, what I'm helping you guys with,
Yeah, that's.
and HR and some of those, and the IT guy. But we've also had to invest in the IT company while you're investing in us as well.
Yeah.
And so it's not a complete wash, but those are the type of things that go down. And Hannah and I have some ideas on how to possibly reduce some more money on some of that stuff as well that we have to look at. And so these are the type of things that we look at to make sure we're good to go. And then the reason we're less in the benefits is as you make less here, this is a formula, as you can see, one's 21%, one's 19. So reality is it's 60 grand less, but this is what we're looking at right here. Just in state apportionment, the midterm stuff that we've been talking about, most of it, 319 grand off. Okay. If we go and it's about the same percentage of what we're down in our best 28 weeks, we'll also lose another 57 in the best 28 weeks. And I'm assuming the same right now for transportation. We won't know that for a little bit because it's based on last year's numbers. The formula is not going to change for another year if it does at all. So we're looking at almost a $400,000 loss here in revenues. It is not doom and gloom. We'll still try to figure it out with some cost saving measures and that. We still have some money in the fund balance, but that's going to kill us, guys. So Hannah's got some good ideas already of what we can do. Again, this is general fund. This isn't any of the other special funds or any of the titles in that. I do know we're a little over in some of our like our SPED funding and stuff like that. The other one that worries me a little bit is our federal forest land. We've got a lot of our SPED people on that, and we don't have enough in there. And the bad thing about the federal forest land is you don't know how much we're going to get until later. It's a crapshoot. Last year we got 79,000, and they don't know how much we're going to get this year. So we had a big fund balance, but we also have a lot of people in it. My hope was that we could, because that federal forest money, the money is supposed to go first towards maintenance of buildings, then can go towards operational. Unfortunate thing is we've been using it all for operational, and now we don't have any money for maintenance because the money right now that's sitting in there with the fund balance and what I don't know what projected the revenue is gonna be, it's gonna use up the entire money for that money.
So we have the funds that were allocated last year, but do you know what was already in there?
Yeah, you guys have 3 positions in sped, 2 pairs and a sped teacher out of that 220 fund. So that's not even included in our general fund, that's allocated in that fund, that's not hitting that right now. Yeah, so that's the fun stuff, and that's how it was last year too, we looked, that we haven't changed anything in funding locations.
Yeah. We used to fund like, our lowest paid teacher out of that. We were over on our total number of teachers that we were funded
Yep.
for, and they could say they were $40,000 salary, then we funded out of that.
Yep.
But most of the time that just sat and accrued, for when we did it.
And there was a lot of cash in there,
Yeah.
but it's gonna get used up real quick. Those are the type of things we're looking at to make sure, and what worries me is when talking to Julie over at the state, she's the one in charge of it and then getting all that information out. You just, one year you might get 25, next year you might get 105.
And some years they'll just skip. Like that we've had sometimes when you don't get anything one year and then the following year you're at 70.
Yeah.
Like it'll just skip a whole year.
And that's the word I have, is, and so, I know there's cash in the bank, but there's salaries attached that normally, the concept of the grant or the concept of the money wasn't to put salaries on it. It could only put salaries when you didn't need it. This is a year we actually need it because we don't have any kind of money, but that we have so much salary on it right now, we gotta figure out how to get some of those to move over to the general fund, which creates a bigger hole potentially in our budget. And some of those things. So those are the things that I'll be working with Hannah to try to get through and try to fix. But it's gonna be a process. And the bad thing with, and you guys are in the same situation that we had with NAMPA, is once we found the issue, you've already signed contracts. The majority of your expenses are teacher contracts, right? So that's the type of stuff that we're working on to see what are the options for some of this stuff to be able to reduce some of the costs. Yeah. So my worry is, are we in a state of emergency here that we potentially need to do that? That's where Hannah needs to work with you guys and decide whether or not we have to do that and potentially look at cuts. That's what you and I talked about, right, Hannah?
My hope is that we can continue through this year without cuts, but it is the last option if we have to do a reduction in force because of a funding emergency. So we don't go in the red.
And let me tell you, no one in this room, this was none of yours' fault by any means. So the reality of the situation, what truly hurt you guys was the fact that you guys lost 40 or 50 kids in 1 year that wasn't projected. Had you guys known that up front, had Hannah known that 6 months ago, when we knew, hey, this is how it's gonna be, you wouldn't have hired, you would have done something totally different with some of the teachers. You would
Our
have done
decisions
different
have been made
classes.
over the summer instead of.
That's exactly right. You wouldn't have spent money on
Middle
certain things. So that's the downfall of not projecting your unit count correctly. And the majority of this loss, like I said, was all because of the unit count. And if we got lucky that we're protected, the next year we're not protected. It'll go based on that 15 number. So it won't be based on the 1782. It'll be based on 97% of the 15 number.
Yeah, and plus we're getting a little bit of a hit because of our sped problems. That did add to our
Yep.
bottom line cost that we had no choice in the matter to fix, right? And we
Yep.
want to fix it, so.
And I think might be some of those that we might be able to go back to the state and say, we just have to want the money, what can we do? And that's the stuff that Hannah gets to have some my conversations with the state and say, this is what we're trying to do. The beauty you have with Hannah is she has a background in sped. So that helps you guys a lot, where usually superintendents don't have that background and can be used as one of those top people. Then you have to hire that person out. And so I think that helps you guys in a way, because she can actually handle that director role somewhat and do some different things what normally a superintendent can't do. So that does help quite a bit in this scenario to be able to potentially look at cost cutting. I hate to leave that as a Debbie Downer on that one, but
Well,
I won't take that personally.
maybe we're under on expenses.
a little bit, but this is too early to see. I can tell you where salaries are. But reality of the situation, you don't know where everything else is until you start getting through because the expenses aren't in there, right? Like our transportation, my worry is if that goes way higher again, I heard there was a little bit of an increase again,
that's gonna hit. And, some of the stuff, what I don't know is like, were there any transportations that didn't get to go, or we had to pay extra to get another busing company to send? Those are the things with some of these trips. Those are the worries I had, with some of those extracurricular stuff.
Basically, Harlow's just, doesn't transport us and we have to come up with another way. And so then, I mean, all last year, like our boys baseball team had to do self-transport for all the parents and stuff.
Yeah.
And our coaches do self-transport. So when it comes to activities, I mean, I think a good way to, fund the activities and the reimbursement for activities is to make sure that you're doing something that is educational every single time you do the building, not just sports related, because when you do something that is educational, now your funding can be reimbursed if it's meeting certain criteria. And so whether it's college and career readiness or whether it's some sort of topic that you're working with in the classroom or things like that, it definitely can help. But that is only pertaining to our activity buses and not our routes. Our routes are the cost that they are. We can't really bring those down.
To get those babies here. Then we stay home.
And FYI, the contract with Carlos was negotiated again this year, but Carlos wanted us to pay a higher amount, and I was unwilling to sign on that. So we're paying the same amount we did last year, 3%.
Well, I mean, that's great because we can't really say we're going to choose somebody else. Like,
Well,
I'm glad you could negotiate that with really no leverage, because we don't have an alternative,
It would have
right?
been in violation of their original contract.
yeah, and it was renegotiated, I think, last
Spring.
year, 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago?
Pretty early on.
And then again, last year, yeah, with the terms speaking more handsome for Carlos. And that's
Very much so. They have to keep the same rates and reduce their routes and their buses.
So what was the term you used for learning off campus?
Self-directed learning.
All right, and so what I've got here is, this is the bus funding cap model here. Do a split screen here, just don't need to use this. It's got all the values already. All right, so you guys are 71, right?
Yes.
All right. When we looked at this, your pricing last year, you guys submitted last year, and this was based on, this is what you got this is what you actually were able to put in, okay? There was $275,000 worth of reimbursable expense. The problem was, because that cost per mile and that cost per kid, it was over 103% on both of these. You see how that's 148 and 214? That's why, right off the bat, you guys were dropped $47,000, almost 48 grand. And that was before the calculations for anything else was even done. So right off the bat, you guys were dropped to 28% loss because of cost per mile and cost per.
And that's just the nature of working
It is.
and what we have, like,
Yeah.
so we can't, I mean, it's unfortunate, but we can't do anything about that besides go to the legislator and be like, dude.
Well, and the thing that really frustrated me is that the new formula I saw actually showed you guys losing more. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I mean, what can you guys do differently? Can you just not drive to Logan? I mean, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't make sense, so it's just like, different things and different frustration that they just need to look at, see. But I mean, it's quite a bit, of what that cost per, and these are the different ones. And so that was actually, that was 2023. I didn't realize I wasn't on the right one.
Yes.
So you were capped down there. You were 65 grand. I was gonna say that math didn't work. So, yeah. So last year, we submitted 309, and you guys were 162 and 292% above everybody in the state. Now, what I
Cost per
don't
rider
know,
is like 4 times as much as anywhere.
yeah, so what I don't know if that's back to your thing of could we buy and be much cheaper than that? I have no idea. My worry is,
Or
You just don't have
where do we
enough
come up with $450,000 to buy 3
generally
buses?
what you do is you lease them. You lease them. I know companies will lease buses, but the reality is, getting the buses, doing all that, you guys gotta make a decision here soon if that's what you're gonna do. And if you can't get a bus driver, then at that point in time, what do? You have a bus that sits, you don't go get the kids. I have no idea how that works. I mean, it is a possibility. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Because that is a ton in relationship to your cost per mile. When you look at Bonneville here, this is what I say with Bonneville. Somehow they're clear down in this area. Yeah. But who's another district that's close to
Can
us?
you show me?
It was Horseshoe Bend right here.
Can you-
Look, Horseshoe Bend owns their own.
Yeah.
They're capped too, 127, 117.
Yeah, but their cost per rider is so much lower. It's 3 times less than us.
Can you?
They're going
scroll
Yeah, but look how much it costs. They only have 71 grand in reimbursable cost. Did they not did they not go as far as you guys?
Not nearly.
It's just literally their own little city limits is all they have.
No,
They go to
they go,
Gardena, they go.
because we count
That's not that far.
and they gotta go to.
Go to Castle Ford.
And you guys are going up hills and down hills. They're
We're
not
just
really
talking about the
doing that,
routes.
Oh,
Yeah.
right?
Actually, our footprint isn't that big either.
I mean,
No.
Loman.
Well,
Is what-
If you put a white
Horseshoe Bend
bus
is-
out there,
is
the
probably as
staff
big as
driver,
us.
but
Loman is the
you gotta
one.
get a-
Yeah, Horseshoe Bend isn't spending any money.
7 to 8 miles up the middle fork and back.
Yeah, they don't have hardly any riders.
But
Who else would be a big one? Garden Valley?
How
That'd
come
be
you guys,
Yay.
You did that on purpose, didn't you? Perfect.
okay, so you see our in lieu cost? How come-
Yeah, this in lieu it's weird. This is what, I don't even know what that is. Honestly, I thought this was something different.
That's not what we consider in lieu, like what we have to pay for student transportation that's private. Like what a parent transports.
It could be. We don't have that yet, but as you can tell, I've
Oh,
never
that's why you
had
have
it, so,
0.
yeah.
So-
Yeah.
And if it is, I don't, so my biggest thing is, I won't even put it on, I always know I'm gonna get capped anyway, which I'm okay getting somewhat capped because that means I'm maximizing the formula, if that makes sense. But I'm not okay, like even this year, I think I was capped almost 500 grand, 450 grand. You know, so Caldwell was not even as big as us, they got big, they were capped.
So question, big question.
Yep.
Combining school districts like Idaho City, Horseshoe Bend, and Garden Valley.
Ask Cassie how they like it. Because Cassie School District has, and so Minidoka the same way, where it's just, nobody tends to like to lose control of their own regional school district.
It's usually a comment made by the community is just that, why do we have one school and one district? And why
Like you
is
have
the
one
district-
superintendent for 3 schools, or, you
That's
know.
usually what we hear from the community.
I don't disagree. Where that would help you is you would have one IT department that runs everything. You have one maintenance department, you have one, it is better. So the difficult times that I know Cash in Minidoka, because I've worked with Cash and Minidoka, I helped kind of same situation you did, but they were a little different story, is you just have so much area to cover.
Yeah, because our county's big.
Yeah,
And
so there's so much area to cover that it's not easy for like that superintendent to necessarily get there. You guys dealt with that last year, you had a part-time superintendent, how much did that work out for you? I don't know, right? And so those type of things were, that's where you get with those. And a lot of people don't like, okay, well, who's gonna be the main decision maker? Well, why did you pick that school district? Are you more favoring this school district? If you left it with us, we could do our own, right? And so I've seen a lot of those districts that are spread out like that really want to actually focus and collapse back in and have their own. Because the other side of it is, okay, so in Minidoka, Paul doesn't have a very good school, and they really should bring that school in, and it would help them. they're big enough that they don't get the credit like you guys have with the Loman School, but they're not big enough to really have sufficient, and the building's crumbling. So now you're not gonna have a elementary school in the city?
Yeah.
How does that work? Right, and now you're gonna bus from Horseshoe Bend here all the way to Horseshoe Bend to make that work? I mean, and now you're just talking sports, so you're gonna have 3 high schools, or you're gonna have 1 high school?
Oh, that'd be drama.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, it sounds good in theory, and people say the same thing in Nampa. Why don't you guys just get with Valley View and just, because they need people, you guys have excess buildings and just do it. Like, you realize we're not in the same place, right? You're gonna bust them, that doesn't really work the same. And we weren't the ones who created it.
Like, short term as far as like when Horseshoe Bend was built, then those students had the right, you know, the ability to come up here or go to Boise, or same thing with Iowa City when it was built.
Yeah.
But again, that was like a year. They didn't have that.
Yeah. Exactly. So, I mean, so in the end, I don't know the best way for your transportation to work. And I think the best way to do it is to potentially talk to some of these small districts. It doesn't look like, I just don't know how Horseshoe Bend is only doing it for that much. It's almost like they only have 1 bus.
Yeah, they have 4 or 5 down there.
Are they not using them? Because there's no way they only have 70 grand in cost. That makes no sense.
I mean,
So they're hitting themselves with a lot more cost outside of that for sports or something like that, that isn't reimbursable. Because all this is to and from and sped. Just remember that. And qualified educational field trips, which isn't a lot either. So the fact they only have 71 that they submitted is, and they're still capped, which makes me laugh. So
it's only good 3.
they only have, however many kids, riders? They only have 42 riders all year, each day.
So they
One
did,
bus.
7,000 miles, right?
Yeah. Reimbursable miles,
91,
yeah.
100 miles. How many miles did we do?
It's right here, right above it. And look at you guys, look at the difference.
29
And 70. So you got a little less than double the kids, but you have 30,000 miles.
We did, something's not right there, man.
Yeah, that doesn't.
There's no way we did 30,000 miles.
See,
No
the thing
way.
is, the thing is about that is they have to actually turn in their odometers to the state.
Yeah.
So they don't, that's the one thing the state does, they have an odometer report they have to turn in. And then they get checked on that when they get reviewed.
I'm gonna do some checking on
How
that.
many routes do we have?
There's just no
Three
chance.
3, so that's 10,000 miles per route, so.
That's a
We
lot of
technically
trips
have
along.
4 routes with 3 buses.
Can you go to Cascade and see what they were?
What number's Cascade?
Not 71.
Meh.
Or 73.
Or,
We're down to 150.
What's their district?
Is Avery Calder still a school district, or do they get bumped with?
Are
St.
they
Mary's?
called Cascade? Because I didn't see them on
I think it's Cascade.
there. Is it Valley District?
no, it should be Cascade School District.
Yes.
Oops. Yeah.
We're down rabbit hole.
Anyway,
Sorted.
$422, I wasn't even there.
No.
It's so low.
There's that many school districts.
so how many miles did they do? They're more wide open than we are.
23.
So the numbers just jump. I just heard one.
Okay, well, man, that's a lot of miles.
I guess that one down to like 300.
39,000 miles.
I want to make
It's the
a
weird
number,
thing,
like
but
someone's
here's
like,
the
I
weird
want
thing.
8,
They have
13,
zero
let's do
riders,
that.
I don't know what, this is weird. See how they have 0 riders here?
Yeah. It's like a
Sounds
good
weird. This
population.
Counts 33 miles from Banks to Loman.
I think
And
someone
they
might
weren't
number
capped, so I don't know
13.
what's going on.
It's weird.
Yeah, so, but yeah, they didn't spend a lot though, they only have 97, and you guys have 300 something. So I have no
I'm
idea.
not sure where the bus is.
Oh, wait.
How does an online school have reimbursements for transportation?
District's not part of 21 state totals, but subject to, I have no idea what this means.
Fiscal year 20.
Not subject to funding cap. So somehow they don't, then regardless, see if some of these guys don't get funding cap, that's why they're down there.
Oh, look, one of them's Blaine County too. That's funny.
Welcome to Blaine County in there. So Blaine and Boise School District are considered independent districts.
They got total 100% reimbursable.
And they're independent, well, yes and no, they're still capped, they were still capped by
Oh,
the
yeah.
state budget. And they were only eligible for, yeah, so it's still weird with them. But they're independent, so they get a tax and additional money on their patrons because they were made before the laws were made. And Emmett was at one time, and they somehow gave up their independent status, which was the funniest thing in the world, why they would do that.
Yeah, there's.
But yeah,
They spent $2 million
Subdivisions
on
past there, the nerd club. Definitely still.
Yeah.
What is the?
so yeah, so that's.
They're at the top.
So that's your busing side. And so those are areas, I mean, every dollar that's over that, it's coming out of your general fund. So, yeah. Any questions, guys?
Depends on how.
So here's, when you're talking about, you asked about maybe a schedule and that kind of stuff. So this is where I'm at, where when I give you guys on revenues and that kind of stuff, these are where I tell you guys, okay, we're either on track or not on track with revenues. And then we go to expenses. So like when I did your report here with expenses. where am I? So when I did this combined report here, so this is just the expense side. And these are the budgets that's in the system right now and where we think you're gonna be in different areas and what we have left over. So it looks really good because you're like, oh, I'm way under budget here and my payroll is looking good at that. But what we don't have is all the rest of it because this is, unless it's in the system, I don't have it. So like our busing contract or any other contracts aren't gonna come through, or heating and air, or any of that stuff's in there. So it's kind of a weird report, but it still gives you where we are today on expenditures, okay? The other one that I do here, and the reason I do these the way that I was doing this, and these are the exact same board reports I give in my district, okay? This one is also, you can see kind of where the original budget is versus the new budget. We'll when we start doing budget adjustments and that kind of stuff, and where money's coming in and where it's not coming in different areas, okay? And these are the budget adjustments that we'll do. But if you look here, we actually do have a balanced budget. 37, 3.7 through 3.7. So we're not budgeted to go into fund balance as far as I know. So when Stephanie, your question is do we use the first balance to, you know what I'm saying? It looks to me like the expenses match the revenue. And there's a little bit, this one's a contingency, this 175. But my worry is I'm not sure because we don't have any lottery now, if that even is applicable anymore, because what we've budgeted in there, that comes away as well. So those are the type of things we'll start looking at and we'll start projecting out. That's why I wanted you guys to still get these. But I think the one that is super important, like what we were saying, is where are you at your percentages, ADA enrollment? Where's your enrollment report? Where's your ADA at? What's your percentage right now? How much kids are coming? And you can either do it by grade, do it by school. I mean, you can do it by grade band. I don't know how you want to do it. But those are the things that you guys should look at to kind of see, okay, this is what could affect this going forward. The problem is midterm's done. Majority of our funding for salaries is done. Now, what we're doing now is correcting things we see in the reports to make sure you maximize that funding. But that's, as soon as January comes and we can correct it for a little bit, but most of those now push everything else out. The only thing we can get now is our best 28 weeks, which is our discretionary, which is a much less number, but it's still additional money if we can find some stuff in there for that kind of stuff.
I guess I'm kind of just thinking like maybe it's too late with the enrollment and the attendance this year, but to identify like what caused that problem. Because in my mind, like I was watching the enrollment from the beginning of the year. It's in our board packet every month, and I'm looking at where we're at. And I'm still a little bit hung up on that because it seems like our low enrollment numbers are in the low grades. Like first grade has 6 kids in it.
Tiny.
Yeah, really tiny, but it's elementary. It shouldn't have that big of effect with that 40.
Yeah, but what was it last year? So I can tell you
Kindergarten
this.
was 5. It went up.
Was that the end
Yeah,
of
but I just think our kids
the
in
year?
the
I just don't think of our high
I mean,
school
by public
classes as being
like,
that small.
it's always been small, like
Our high school
kindergarten
classes
for 2
are-
years in a row was super small.
This year's.
But
So-
our population maybe even.
So this is what they used to create the budget, this is the document they used on create to 19 point, whatever, the 19.24, right here, this one on this side, so I'm gonna make this bigger so you can see it. So they estimated at the end of last year what you would have in kindergarten, they thought you'd have 10 kindergartners, and grades 1 through 6, 79. Is that about where you guys are?
I would even do it.
Seems about right.
Or-
We have like 220.
Do you remember, Debbie? This was at least 16.
I would like.
All I can say is when I looked at the unit count, you did not have 1080, you did not have 10.
No, and if we, I mean, I think it's gonna take a long.
And this is
time.
again ADA, it's not even enrollment.
Well, and that's why I'm wondering, like, I don't think of enrollment as being that low for the high schoolers. Where,
But-
where it matters the most for
But this
budget
is,
stuff.
this is considering an ADA of 239, almost 240. That's ADA of 240, if that makes sense. So
Oh.
if you,
We're
yeah,
not there. We're at 2.
and your enrollment is 220, I think, right now, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I'm saying you already, you're 88, so if you guys are at 95%,
Right. We have to
yeah, you see that in math here, it just isn't working.
be, yeah, 20%.
It doesn't matter, you can tell them if you want.
12 in kindergarten, 7 in first, 12 second, 8 in third, 16 fourth, 16 fifth, 19 sixth, 13 seventh.
Okay, never mind, I just wanted to add those together, but either way,
I can add them. 24 and 8th, 17 and 9th, 29 and 10th,
for
11
grades
has
1 through 4,
23.
1 through 6, I mean,
1 through 6.
yeah. I could probably do it on that.
I guess I don't understand why, if the budget was based off of, you said it was 240,
No, so this is ADA of 240.
which is worse, right? So it means they,
So that meant that their enrollment, they were anticipating enrollment of
260,
260, 270.
something like that. Okay, so
Which is 40 kids, that's it.
why wouldn't you buffer that down?
It's really easy,
Why would you-
it's really easy to say that, except for the other side of that, when you budget that much lower, who are you gonna get rid of,
Oh,
right? I have the same thing every year with my people, it's like, hey, I gotta be real, conservative, right? The moment in time you can't give raises, or you gotta let the people go. And did they really think they were gonna lose 40 kids last year? That's a huge exodus. I mean, last year they showed how much they had, and so I wouldn't have thought that you would have lost that many kids. I have no idea why that's.
well, it doesn't feel like we lost that many kids. I wonder if it's more attendance is way down instead of the enrollment.
I think that's.
I don't know, she told me.
I'm shocked.
30 something.
just on my little window of dental patients, how many kids are homeschooled?
Stephanie, do you have
Yeah, it's
enrollment
just
report from last year?
Young kids.
I have a whole bunch on my
It's
computer, even
not
from
just
many
inputs.
years ago.
I don't know if you're out there.
Ask your kids, there's kids.
You want me to go to office?
It doesn't.
1 through 6 is 78.
If we think about.
Yeah, but
like-
what we're getting beginning of the year,
Oh,
the first 10, like your November count is really what you.
It was-
It was under 200.
Yeah.
Under 200.
For
Start the
enrollment,
year.
and then you ended with 250.
Like, this whole.
So you guys, no, there's no way, because the numbers don't support that. You guys actually had less than best 20 weeks in the first 10.
You're talking about this year?
Oh, this year, you
Yeah,
guys were 200.
this year we were.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah.
We started at
That's
like
what I call it.
197.
Really? I thought we
We gradually been getting more.
Well, first off, preschool didn't start.
Yeah, it doesn't count these.
But preschool is not part of it, yeah.
Yeah. Ouch, I didn't realize it was that bad. Yeah, it was all your fault.
I know.
Trust issues.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back to last year.
Trust issues.
Yep.
And change in how education just is. I mean, it's, we
I believe it's easier to homeschool elementary kids than it is high school kids, when it comes to the content, and so.
We have 251, but
Feel
she
more
has
confident
She
in
don't
that.
want kids having any social.
So, yes, but when it comes to the content, most people are more.
Yes,
more
they're worried about what
comfortable
the
in
wokeness of your district,
Yeah.
even though I think you guys are probably the least woke district.
Because you get to pull up.
No, my district, yes.
So that's,
Always see
that
yes.
much more, like 9-ish are where you have that.
Even in Kansas County, ours is years past what they think. We're not
You
counting.
know, us
Yeah,
to-
if we look back at our numbers from like
Sure they
2016, 17,
I'll be
18 time,
understanding.
like pre-COVID ever even was thought of. We were like between 110 and 125 for kinder through. So 50.
Yeah.
So, it's not a big difference. If you look at how our numbers are right now.
Yeah, no, well, that's what I'm saying.
One by the
So
number,
they'll-
you can figure it out.
For free, yeah.
You have to do it with his office. Yeah.
I said it wrong, didn't I? I probably did say it.
Oh, like that, theoretically, that it's usually actually used, and I just like looked for another.
Well, I was gonna say, what is it? Why buy the milk when you get cow for free? Is that what I said? Yeah, so I always screw up. Either way, you know what I meant. So I was dyslexic in my example. But that's where we are, though, honestly. Is if a lot of kids are still using their services in high school that aren't coming, then that's killing you guys. I would fuck with that one, that's good. It's gonna piss a lot of people off, though.
Sure. I
Sports
can.
cost money in
Really?
general.
Say you want us to go broke? I mean, I have no problem getting in front of anybody.
That's what I was doing as you were going through it.
If you want a town hall of any of this stuff, I'll bring it up to anybody.
Well, it is
Numbers
what
don't
it
lie. He's got it on Facebook. Right, you put it on Facebook?
Well, we're live on
And he should put it on
That
Facebook.
computer's live on YouTube.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Advertising.
As it should be.
Yeah.
And we're okay with that. I mean, we're not trying to hide anything here, and I'm not trying to, I mean, the numbers, you saw the numbers. It's a report that I don't create. So those are the things we just need to look at and that. So I think in the end, it's not so much it's insurmountable. It's not like what happened to me, but as soon as we found out we were negative, we had to shut down parts of the buildings because we couldn't afford to eat.
Yeah.
But reality situation, I mean, we literally had to get payday loans just to make our summer payroll. We had to get $6.5 million loans from DL Evans Bank to make payroll over the summers before I got there. So yeah, we're not that bad, guys. We can get through this.
And again, at the start of the school year, we were at under 200 for enrollment, so.
Yeah, right.
Big gains.
And that's the key. And then just the unfortunate part is like this the way the state does it is everything is concentrated in those first 10 weeks. The new formula, so one of the things they're talking about, so again, this is where the voucher conversation, and this is what worries me if the vouchers really happen, because you have so many people willing to do homeschooling that they're now going to see this free money from the state that they might be able to get paid to homeschool, which is going to hurt you guys even more, right? Big money coming from out there, Betsy DeVos, all these people are Wilk Brothers, they're literally putting a ton of money into getting this happening. It's funny, they hated the Prop 1 thing, there's all this big money from out of state, but apparently big money from out of state that have to deal with vouchers is okay. But yeah, that's a big thing that's gonna potentially hurt you guys. And that's the thing we're gonna have to watch and see if that happens. Now, our state superintendent and governor are trying to thwart it a little bit, saying we're probably gonna have a little bit of something, so they're trying to work around it. In order to really make vouchers work properly, ultimately what they have to do is they have to go to a formula that's basically a per kid allocation. And so what Representative Horman out of Bonneville area, and Idaho Falls came up with a couple of years ago was every school district, it doesn't matter, the state apportionment basically goes away, and it doesn't matter what you pay, you're gonna get $9,000 per kid. And the reason they wanna do that is they can show, okay, we're gonna get 9,000 to the general public, but we're gonna get 5,000 to the vouchers, and see, we're just giving them less, but we're giving them some. And that's how it works. The problem with that is then you now don't get paid based on the skill of your teacher. So now you're based on, I can't hire you because you're too expensive a teacher, you're too good of a teacher, you've been here too long.
Yeah.
Those are the type of things that happen in that situation. It's a terrible model. So Superintendent Critchfield is trying to go through and kind of keep a portion of this, the state apportionment, to then redo
the discretionary side a little bit and include, like that safe and drug free and some of these other things that are in their PD and put that in one bucket and kind of put that into one big bucket instead that we can have better discretion on. The problem is, the one thing I've noticed in 11 years with this is, and it started out with our discretionary funding was one big pot that we had basically said, and that was to pay for everything. And then we kept saying, well, you're not giving us any money because our health insurance is going up. So they split the pot. Remember I told you there was two pots, one health insurance and that. So they can show, well, we'll give you money on health insurance. We're just not going to give you much money in discretionary. So when it's a big pot, the legislators don't like giving a lot of money. The only time they give money for their special projects. Ooh, I like giving to this career technical school. Oh, I like giving to this literacy thing. Then they give us a bunch of reports to do about it. And that's how they give money. If it's a big pot of money and they'll see a 5% increase, they'll look, ooh, 5% is $100 million. Dude, that's way too much to give them.
Yeah.
At that point in time, we won't get the increases in those things that we would normally get through the other statutory stuff. So it's kind of a lose-lose situation in my opinion. I don't think Richfield has a lot of love from the legislators to get it through anyway. But I think the vouchers, they purposely voted out, the lady Caldwell Yamamoto, they purposely voted out Kenny Broughton in my district as well in Lampa. And because they voted against vouchers for years and they Freedom Foundation and those people with Christian Coalition came after them pretty
A
hard.
lot of out-of-state money.
A lot of out-of-state money came in to get out those people, and we've got a big, pretty much they bought enough people in there that it's gonna happen this year. It was super close last year, we thought it was gonna happen, and Kenny Broughton was the one that kind of stopped it, because they took it through a different committee, and that's why they went after him. Even though he went through all the other stuff and voted exactly like they wanted in other ways, he voted against that. And so they took it after him, and Yamamoto was the other lady out of college, and Caldwell, that was great for education, and they got her out as well. They've gotten a lot of experienced people out for different reasons, and that's gonna be a big hit. And I think in our district, I'm worried because we have private schools, but I think in your district, you don't really have private schools per se, but you have homeschool. And people will see the ability to keep their kids home and potentially get a tax break or the money for it. And you already have people.
And people have been doing it without that right now.
I know, and that's the thing is,
Yeah.
and what they did last time they tried to get it through, there was no income limits. So at that point in time, if you were rich, you still got it. And that was the frustration, and that's what a lot of states that did that, like Arizona and that, when you don't have Lincoln limit, all it basically does is people are already getting it, now just get windfall money. And it's just like, well, that's not helping the people you want. And they'll say it's for sped and that kind of stuff. I've never seen a private school do sped. And so what's gonna happen is your district and everybody else's district's gonna go down. We're gonna get kids that won't fit into the private school environment, homeschool environment. Or, it's gonna be like back east, you have or have nots, have puts their kids in private school, have nots go to public school. All sped goes to public school because they're most expensive and no one can do anything with them. So it's good times. It's fun. It's gonna happen this year. So that's why we'll keep you abreast of all the stuff that's happening in the legislature, so you kind of know, and that's what's gonna influence how our budget's gonna work going forward too. Well, it's 9 o'clock, guys. I gotta drive home.
Thank you.
Dang. Is there anything else on the agenda?
You're welcome.
Thanks, Randy. That was stupid.
And now when we talk in the future, we can still, now you'll need to be a little bit more saying, okay, this is where we are in units and that, so you'll understand where we're at now. So I think it's hard when you have another background.
All right, we're gonna adjourn at 8:50.
Thank you.
And feel free to send me emails and call me if you have any questions too. Yeah. Appreciate it.